The door swung open before she could cover herself. Ethan Cole stood frozen, his hand still on the handle, staring at the scars that crawled across his CEO's bare back, wounds she had hidden from the world for 15 years. Claire Harrington's eyes met his in the mirror, and in that single, horrifying second, both of their lives shattered. He had seen what no one was ever meant to see. She had been exposed by the one person she was about to destroy. What happened next would either end them both or save them in ways neither could imagine. If you want to discover how one moment of vulnerability transformed two broken souls, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The alarm screamed at 5:45 in the morning, and Ethan Cole's hand shot out from beneath the thin blanket to silence it before the sound could travel down the narrow hallway to his daughter's room. His fingers found the phone, fumbled with the screen, and finally, mercifully, the noise stopped. For a moment, he simply lay there in the darkness, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had been growing larger for the past 3 months. He had meant to call the landlord about it. He had meant to do a lot of things. The bed beside him was empty. It had been empty for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. But some mornings, like this one, he still reached for her. His hand would slide across the cold sheets, searching for warmth that no longer existed, before his brain caught up with his heart and reminded him that Sarah was gone. Cancer. The word felt insufficient for what it had done to his family. It was too clinical, too small. It couldn't capture the way Sarah had faded over those final months. Couldn't describe the sound of her voice when she made him promise to take care of their daughter, couldn't begin to explain the hollow space that had lived inside his chest ever since. Ethan pushed himself upright and swung his legs over the side of the bed. His feet touched the cold floor, and he winced. The heating had been unreliable lately, another thing he needed to address but couldn't afford to fix. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better decades, but it was what he could manage on a senior analyst's salary while still keeping Lily in a decent school district. He moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, shave, the suit that needed dry cleaning but would have to survive another day. Coffee from the machine that gurgled and complained but still produced something resembling caffeine. He stood at the kitchen counter watching the dark liquid drip into the pot and tried to organize his thoughts for the day ahead. Today was the board presentation. 6 months of work, countless late nights, and everything riding on 90 minutes in front of the most powerful people at Harrington Financial. If it went well, if the numbers held up, if he could somehow make the quarterly projections sound like a growth opportunity instead of the disaster they actually represented, there was a chance, a real chance at the promotion he had been chasing for the past year. Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning. The title meant more money, better hours, and maybe, finally, the ability to give Lily the life Sarah had dreamed about for her. Dance lessons she didn't have to skip because of scheduling conflicts. A birthday party that wasn't limited to 5 friends because of budget constraints. College savings that actually existed instead of remaining a theoretical concept he worried about at 3 in the morning. The coffee finished brewing. Ethan poured a cup, burned his tongue on the first sip, and checked the time on his phone. 6:23. He had roughly an hour before he needed to wake Lily, get her dressed, make her breakfast, pack her lunch, and drop her off at school before racing across town to the office. An hour. He could use that time to review the presentation one more time, to double-check the figures that had been keeping him awake for the past week. Something about the third quarter projections had been nagging at him, a sense that the numbers didn't quite add up, but every time he ran them through the spreadsheet, they came out the same. He opened his laptop on the kitchen table and pulled up the file. The slides glowed in the dim morning light, each one representing hours of work, careful analysis, and strategic thinking. Slide 1, Executive Summary. Slide 2, Market Position Analysis. Slide 3, Third Quarter Performance. There. That was where the unease lived. Ethan leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowing. The revenue figures showed a 12% increase over the previous quarter, which would be excellent news if he believed them. But the underlying data didn't support that kind of growth. Client acquisition was down. Retention had been flat. The only way to reach 12% was if... His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Chen, his colleague, and the closest thing he had to a friend at Harrington Financial. You see the email from Claire's office? Emergency meeting at 8. All department heads, something's up. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Emergency meetings with Claire Harrington were never good news. The woman ran the company like a general commanding troops in wartime, precise, demanding, and utterly without mercy for those who failed to meet her standards. He had worked at Harrington Financial for 4 years, and in that time he had seen Claire maybe 24 times. She existed on a different plane than regular employees, appearing only for major announcements or when someone was about to be very publicly terminated. She was beautiful in the way that marble statues were beautiful, cold, perfect, and completely unapproachable. Her reputation preceded her everywhere she went. Youngest CEO in the company's history, architect of 3 major acquisitions, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to identify weakness. People who disappointed Claire Harrington did not get second chances. They got severance packages and carefully worded LinkedIn recommendations. Ethan typed back a quick reply to Marcus. Just saw it. Any idea what it's about? The response came almost immediately. No clue, but the timing with the board presentation can't be coincidence. No, Ethan thought, it couldn't be. He closed the laptop and took another sip of coffee, this time more carefully. Whatever was happening, he needed to be ready. He needed to be perfect. Today, of all days, there was no room for error. From down the hallway came a small sound, the creak of bed springs, the soft pad of feet on carpet. Ethan glanced at the clock. 6:41. Early for Lily to be awake, but she had always been a light sleeper. A moment later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway. 6 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, wearing the purple pajamas covered in dancing unicorns that she had insisted on for her last birthday. She clutched a stuffed rabbit in one arm. Mr. Whiskers, who had once been white but was now a uniform gray from years of love and too many trips through the washing machine. Daddy? Ethan set down his coffee and crossed the kitchen to kneel in front of her. Hey, sweetheart, you're up early. Everything okay? Lily rubbed her eyes with her free hand. I had a dream about Mommy. The words hit him like a physical blow, the way they always did. He pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck, and for a moment, he just held her there in the dim light of the kitchen. Was it a good dream? He asked softly. She was at my recital. Lily's voice was muffled against his shoulder. She was sitting in the front row, and she was smiling. The recital. Tonight. The autumn dance performance that Lily's school had been preparing for over the past 2 months, the one she had been practicing for every day, the one that fell on the exact same evening as the board presentation and the dinner afterward that all senior staff were expected to attend. Ethan had told her he might not be able to make it. He had explained about work, about important meetings, about all the grown-up things that sometimes had to come first. She had nodded seriously, her little face so understanding, so mature beyond her years, and it had broken his heart more than any tears ever could have. I know you might not come, she said now, pulling back to look at him with those gray eyes that were so much like his own. But I pretend you're there anyway. That's what Miss Martinez told us to do. She said to pick someone in the audience, even if we can't see them, and dance just for them. And who do you dance for, sweetheart? You. She said it simply, without hesitation. And Mommy. I close my eyes during the twirly part, and I pretend you're both watching. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. He pulled her close again, pressing his face into her hair, and made a promise to himself that he would keep, even if it cost him everything. I'll be there, he whispered. I'll find a way. Kota. By 7:30, the morning chaos had reached its usual fever pitch. Lily's hair refused to cooperate with the braid she wanted, her lunchbox was missing its lid, and somewhere between the bathroom and the bedroom, Mr. Whiskers had disappeared entirely, leading to a 5-minute search that ended with the rabbit being discovered under the couch cushions. Daddy, I need my pink shoes, not the white ones. The pink ones are at school, remember? You left them there after gym. But I need them for the recital. They'll be there tonight, I promise. Right now, we need the white ones so you're not late. The drive to school took 22 minutes on a good day and 45 when traffic was bad. Today was somewhere in between, 33 minutes of stop-and-go traffic, during which Lily chattered about her dance routine, her best friend Maya's new cat, and whether unicorns could exist if scientists really tried hard to make them. Ethan listened and responded in all the right places, but part of his mind was already at the office, already in that emergency meeting, already trying to figure out what Claire Harrington wanted and how he could survive whatever was coming. He pulled up to the school drop-off line at exactly 8:02, which meant he would be late for the emergency meeting. There was no way around it. The office was 25 minutes away on a perfect day, and nothing about this day had been perfect so far. "Okay, sweetheart." He turned in his seat to face Lily. "I'll see you tonight, okay? Break a leg." She grinned at him, that bright gap-toothed smile that looked so much like Sarah's it made his chest ache. "That's what you say to actors, Daddy. Dancers say merde." "Who taught you that word?" "Maya. Her mom is French." "Well, don't say it at school." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Lilybug." "Love you too, Daddy." She scrambled out of the car, backpack bouncing, and ran toward the entrance where a teacher was waiting. She turned at the door and waved, and Ethan waved back, watching until she disappeared inside. Then he pulled away from the curb and drove toward a building full of people who would never understand that the most important thing in his world had just walked through a set of double doors, wearing mismatched shoes because her father couldn't find the right pair. Harrington Financial occupied the top 15 floors of a glass tower in the heart of the city's business district. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to intimidate visitors and remind employees that they worked for a company with very expensive taste. Ethan had stopped noticing the grandeur years ago. Now it was just the place where he spent more hours than anywhere else. The building that consumed his time and energy in exchange for a paycheck that was never quite enough. The emergency meeting was in Conference Room A on the 42nd floor, which meant Ethan had to take 2 different elevators and navigate a maze of hallways to reach it. By the time he arrived, 8:27, almost half an hour late, the room was already full. Marcus spotted him and gestured to an empty chair near the back. Ethan slid into it as quietly as possible, trying not to draw attention, but it was too late. The figure at the front of the room had already noticed his entrance. Claire Harrington stood at the head of the long conference table, a tablet in her hand, her expression as unreadable as always. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a crisp white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. Beautiful, yes, but the kind of beautiful that felt dangerous, like touching a live wire or standing too close to the edge of a cliff. "Nice of you to join us, Mr. Cole." Her voice carried through the room, clear and cold. Ethan felt every eye turned toward him. "I apologize, Ms. Harrington. I had a family situation this morning." "A family situation." She repeated the words without inflection, as though they were a foreign concept she was examining for the first time. "I assume it's resolved?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then you won't mind staying after this meeting to discuss your portion of the board presentation." It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. Claire turned back to the room, dismissing him as efficiently as she would have dismissed a piece of furniture. "As I was saying, the board presentation this afternoon represents the most significant moment for this company in the past 3 years. The numbers we present will determine whether we receive continued investment or whether our major stakeholders begin exploring other options." She let the words hang in the air. Other options. Everyone in the room understood what that meant. Layoffs, restructuring, the kind of corporate bloodbath that left careers destroyed and resumed circulating. "I've reviewed the preliminary materials submitted by each department," Claire continued. "Some of them are adequate. Others?" Her gaze swept the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on several faces. "Others will require significant revision before I'm satisfied." She tapped something on her tablet. "Strategic planning. Your third quarter analysis shows a 12% revenue increase, but the supporting data doesn't appear until slide 47. The board won't read that far. If we're claiming 12%, I need that substantiation front and center." Ethan felt his heart rate spike. This was exactly what he had been worried about this morning. The 12% was there in the raw numbers, but it was soft, a combination of deferred revenue recognition and creative accounting that technically met compliance standards but would crumble under serious scrutiny. "I'll have the revisions completed by noon," he heard himself say. Claire's eyes found his again. "By 11. I want time to review before the presentation. 11. Yes, ma'am. The meeting continued for another 45 minutes, with Claire systematically dissecting every department's contribution and assigning increasingly impossible deadlines. When it was finally over, people filed out in grim silence, like soldiers leaving a briefing for a battle they weren't sure they could win. Marcus caught Ethan's arm as they moved toward the door. You okay? You look like you're about to pass out. I'm fine. Ethan's voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. I just need to figure out how to make 12% appear out of thin air. That bad? The numbers are technically accurate. They're just not stable. If the board asks the wrong questions, the whole thing falls apart. Marcus whistled low. And Claire wants it bulletproof by 11. Apparently. Good luck, man. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. I'll bring you coffee. Lots of coffee. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ethan alone in the corridor. Alone except for the voice that came from behind him. Mr. Cole. My office. Now. Claire Harrington's office occupied a corner of the 43rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was decorated with the kind of minimalist precision that spoke of professional interior designers and an absolute intolerance for clutter. A single orchid sat on the windowsill, the only organic thing in the entire room, and Ethan wondered briefly who was responsible for keeping it alive. Claire gestured to one of the chairs facing her desk. Sit. Ethan sat. She remained standing, moving to the window, her back to him. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared out at the morning sky where gray clouds were beginning to gather. Tell me about the 12%, she said finally. The 12%? Don't repeat what's in the presentation. Tell me what's behind it, the real story. Ethan hesitated. This was the moment where his career would either survive or end. He could lie, could maintain the polished narrative he had been crafting for months. Or he could tell the truth and hope that Claire Harrington valued honesty over convenient fiction. The 12% is real, he said slowly, but it's built on assumptions that may not hold through the fourth quarter. We had some one-time gains from the Peterson account that won't repeat. We accelerated recognition on the Morrison contract. If you strip away the outliers, the actual growth is closer to 4%. Silence. Claire remained at the window, her back still turned. 4%, she said. The board is expecting 15. I know. If we present 15 and deliver 4, we lose credibility. If we present 4, we lose confidence. I know. Finally, she turned. Her expression was not angry. That was the strange thing. Ethan had expected fury, had braced himself for the cold dismissal that ended careers at Harrington Financial. Instead, she looked almost tired. You're the only one who told me the truth, she said quietly. Everyone else in that meeting smiled and nodded and pretended their numbers were perfect. Ethan didn't know what to say. He watched as Claire moved behind her desk and sat down, her movements precise but lacking the sharp energy he usually associated with her. I've built this company from scratch, Mr. Cole. Did you know that? She didn't wait for an answer. 20 years ago, I was working in a one-room office with a borrowed desk and a phone that didn't always work. Now we have 15 floors in this building and offices in 6 countries. It's an impressive achievement. It's a trap. The word came out harder than expected. Every year, the numbers have to be bigger. Every quarter, the growth has to be faster. The moment we stop performing, the investors move on to the next shiny opportunity, and everything I built becomes someone else's acquisition target. She looked at him then, and for just a second, Ethan saw something behind her eyes that he hadn't expected. Not coldness, not calculation. Something that looked almost like desperation. I need that presentation to work, she said. I need those numbers to be defensible. Can you make that happen? By 11? By whatever time it takes to do it right. She held his gaze. I don't care if you're here until midnight. I don't care if you miss every meal between now and the presentation. I need this fixed, Mr. Cole. Can you fix it? Ethan thought about Lily, about the recital, about the promise he had made this morning, kneeling in the dim kitchen light while his daughter talked about dancing for the people she loved. I can try, he said. I don't want you to try. I want you to succeed. Claire leaned back in her chair. Go. You have work to do, Dad. The next 3 hours were a blur of spreadsheets, phone calls, and increasingly desperate calculations. Ethan worked at his desk while Marcus brought him coffee and sandwiches he barely touched, his eyes never leaving the screen as he searched for some way to make the numbers work. The problem wasn't the 12%. The problem was making it look stable enough to survive the board's scrutiny. He needed backup data, historical comparisons, market analysis, anything that would create a foundation under numbers that were essentially standing on quicksand. By 10:45, he had something. Not perfect, but better. A narrative that acknowledged the unusual nature of the quarter while emphasizing strategic positioning for future growth. It was honest without being devastating, optimistic without being delusional. He sent the revised file to Claire's office and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At 11:15, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Conference room B, now. Ethan found Claire alone in the room, his presentation displayed on the large screen at the front. She was standing with her arms crossed, studying slide after slide as they advanced automatically. You moved the Peterson analysis to the executive summary, she said without looking at him. Yes, I thought it was important to address it head on. It makes us look like we're making excuses. With respect, Ms. Harrington, it makes us look like we're being transparent. The board will appreciate honesty more than spin. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face him, and there was something different in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps the absence of frost. You're either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Cole. I've been accused of both. For just a second, so brief he might have imagined it, the corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but closer than anything he had seen from her before. The presentation starts at 2, she said. I want you in the room, front row, left side. If they ask questions about strategic planning, you answer them. Me? Ethan blinked. But the department head usually handles. David Chang handles the easy questions. You'll handle the hard ones. She picked up her tablet. That's all, Mr. Cole. Be ready. She walked past him toward the door, her heels clicking on the floor. At the threshold, she paused. Mr. Cole? Yes? Your daughter. The recital is tonight? Ethan felt surprise flood through him. How did she know about that? He had never mentioned Lily at work, had always kept that part of his life carefully separated from the world of quarterly reports and profit margins. Yes, he said slowly. It starts at 7. Claire nodded once, her face unreadable. Then I suggest you plan your time carefully. She disappeared through the door, leaving Ethan alone with 23 slides, and the sinking feeling that today was about to become much more complicated than he had anticipated. The board presentation was scheduled for conference room A at 2 o'clock. By 1:45, the room was already filling with people Ethan had only seen in photographs, men and women whose faces appeared in business magazines and financial reports, whose decisions moved markets and shaped industries. He found his seat in the front row, left side, exactly as Claire had instructed. His palms were sweating. His collar felt too tight. On the other side of the room, David Chang gave him a look that was equal parts confusion and resentment. Clearly, he hadn't been told about Ethan's elevated role in the proceedings. At exactly 2 o'clock, Claire Harrington entered the room. She had changed since the morning meeting. The charcoal blazer was gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored black dress that somehow made her look both more elegant and more intimidating. She moved to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times, who could navigate a room full of skeptical investors while simultaneously solving complex equations in her head. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know your time is valuable, so I'll get directly to the point. The presentation began. Ethan watched the slides he had agonized over appear on the screen, heard Claire walk through each section with a precision that made his own analysis sound like poetry. She was brilliant, he realized. Not just intelligent, but genuinely brilliant. Able to take complicated financial concepts and make them accessible without dumbing them down. For the first half hour, everything went smoothly. The board members nodded at the right moments, asked predictable questions about market positioning and competitive landscape. David Chang handled the softballs with practiced ease. Then came slide 23. Third quarter performance. The 12% revenue increase, said one of the board members, A silver-haired man whose name Ethan couldn't remember, but whose face had appeared on the cover of Fortune magazine at least twice. "Can you walk us through the components?" Claire glanced at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, strategic planning has prepared a detailed breakdown. Would you like to address this?" Ethan stood on legs that didn't feel entirely connected to his body. "Of course, Ms. Harrington." He moved to the front of the room, aware of every eye tracking his progress. The slide showed the familiar numbers, 12% growth, broken down into client acquisition, contract expansion, and new market penetration. What it didn't show were the asterisks, the footnotes, the uncomfortable truths hiding beneath the surface. "The 12% represents our best quarter in the past 18 months, Ethan began. However, I want to be transparent about the composition of that number." He saw David Chang's expression shift from confusion to alarm. He felt Claire's gaze on him, steady and unblinking. Approximately 8 percentage points of that growth came from standard operations, client acquisition, and contract renewals performing at or above expectations. The remaining 4 points came from two significant but non-recurring sources: the Peterson account transition and accelerated recognition on our Morrison contract. The silver-haired board member leaned forward. "You're saying the growth isn't sustainable?" "I'm saying the current quarter's performance reflects both strong fundamentals and favorable timing. Going forward, we project growth in the 7 to 9% range, lower than this quarter but significantly higher than our historical average." Silence in the room. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel sweat forming at the back of his neck. Then the silver-haired man nodded slowly. "I appreciate the honesty, Mr. Cole. It's refreshing to hear numbers presented without the usual corporate spin." The tension in the room shifted. Other board members began nodding, their expressions moving from skepticism to something closer to respect. Claire's face remained unreadable, but she gave Ethan an almost imperceptible nod before resuming her position at the front of the room. The presentation continued. More questions came, and Ethan answered the ones directed at him with the same straightforward honesty that had characterized his first response. By 3:30, when Claire finally concluded the formal presentation, the atmosphere had transformed from interrogation to collaboration. "Thank you all for your attention," Claire said. "We'll have a brief reception in the executive dining room, followed by individual conversations for those who have additional questions." People began to rise, conversations erupting around the room. Ethan started to return to his seat, but Claire's voice stopped him. "Mr. Cole, a word." He followed her to the corner of the room, away from the noise and the crowds. She stood with her back to the window, the afternoon light casting her features in sharp relief. "That was a risk," she said quietly, telling them about the non-recurring revenue. "It was the truth." "The truth can be dangerous, Mr. Cole, especially in a room full of people who have billions of dollars riding on what they choose to believe." "I know." He met her eyes. "But you asked me to make the presentation defensible. The only way to do that was to be honest about what the numbers actually meant." Claire studied him for a long moment. "You're an unusual man, Ethan Cole." It was the first time she had used his first name. The intimacy of it caught him off guard, made him aware of how close they were standing, how the noise of the room seemed to have faded into background static. "The reception will last until 5, she said. "The board members who matter most will want to talk with you personally. After that, there's a dinner at 7. All senior staff are expected to attend." 7 o'clock. The recital started at 7. "Ms. Harrington, Claire." She cut him off. "After today, you can call me Claire." Claire. The name felt strange in his mouth. "The dinner at 7. Is attendance mandatory?" Something flickered in her eyes. "You're thinking about your daughter's recital. How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know about the people who work for me, Mr. Cole. The people who matter, anyway." She looked away, toward the window, where the afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. "The dinner is important. The board members will be there. Networking opportunities, relationship building. The things that determine who gets promoted and who gets overlooked." Ethan's heart sank. He thought about Lily, about the purple pajamas and the gap-toothed smile, about the promise he had made in the dim light of the kitchen. "I understand," he said quietly. "Do you?" Claire's voice was sharp. "Do you understand what you'd be giving up? This dinner could determine your entire career trajectory. Every senior VP at this company has attended at least 3 of these events. Missing one, especially the one where you just made such a strong impression, would be noticed. I know, but your daughter is more important. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan didn't know how to respond. Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded like a trap, an invitation to admit weakness that would be used against him later. But the way Claire said it, there was something in her voice that he couldn't quite identify. "She's 6, he finally said, "and she lost her mother 2 years ago. The recital is the first time she's performed since Sarah died. She's been practicing every day, talking about it constantly, and I promised her—" He stopped, his throat suddenly tight. "I promised her I would be there." Claire was silent for a long moment. Then she turned back to face him, and her expression was different than anything he had seen from her before. Softer, somehow, almost sad. "My father never came to any of my performances," she said quietly. "Piano recitals, school plays, graduation. He always had something more important, some meeting or deal that couldn't wait." Her jaw tightened. "I told myself it didn't matter, that his success was what made my life possible, that I should be grateful for what he provided, even if he was never there to see me enjoy it. Claire, go to your daughter's recital, Mr. Cole." She stepped back, the softness disappearing, the CEO mask sliding back into place. "I'll make your excuses to the board." "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm telling." She pulled out her phone, checking something on the screen. "The presentation went well. Your job is secure. The promotion we discussed—" She paused. "We'll talk about that next week." Ethan stared at her, trying to reconcile this woman with the cold, demanding CEO he had worked under for 4 years. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I didn't have anyone who told me it was okay to choose my family over my work." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And I wish someone had." Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward a group of board members who had been waiting to speak with her. Within seconds, she was Claire Harrington again, brilliant, commanding, untouchable. The brief glimpse of vulnerability had vanished as completely as if it had never existed. But Ethan had seen it, and he knew, with sudden certainty, that everything he thought he knew about his CEO had been wrong. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of handshakes and conversations and business cards exchanged. Ethan moved through it on autopilot, his mind constantly drifting to the woman across the room who had just given him permission to be a father first and an employee second. At 5:15, he slipped away from the reception and made his way to his desk. The office was quiet now, most people still upstairs at the event. He gathered his things quickly, jacket, phone, the small framed photo of Lily that he kept next to his monitor, and headed for the elevator. He was halfway to his car when his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Heard you're skipping the dinner. You okay?" "More than okay. Tell you about it tomorrow." "You're not fired?" "Not even close." Traffic was lighter than he expected, and he made it across town in 20 minutes instead of the usual 35. The school parking lot was already filling up when he arrived. Parents and grandparents streaming toward the entrance, programs clutched in their hands. Ethan found a spot near the back of the lot and hurried toward the building. He could hear music coming from inside, the warm-up sounds of the school orchestra, children's voices raised in excited chatter. He pushed through the doors and into the gymnasium, which had been transformed into an auditorium with rows of folding chairs and a makeshift stage at the far end. The front rows were already full. He scanned the crowd, looking for an empty seat, and found one near the middle. A woman smiled at him as he sat down. "Just in time," she said. "The kindergarten class is first." "My daughter's in first grade," Ethan said. "Lily Cole." "Oh, the ballet number? My daughter Maya has been talking about Lily for weeks. She says she's the best dancer in the class." Maya, Lily's best friend, the one with the French mother who taught her words she wasn't supposed to say at school. Ethan smiled, some of the tension finally draining from his shoulders. "Maya's cat," he said. "Lily told me about it this morning. What's its name?" "Professor Whiskers." The woman laughed. Maya insisted. She said all cats need titles. The lights dimmed. The conversations around him faded to whispers, then to silence. On the stage, the curtain rustled, and a teacher stepped out to welcome everyone to the annual autumn recital. Ethan barely heard the words. His eyes were fixed on the curtain, waiting for the moment it would open and reveal the first-grade dance class in their tutus and leotards. Waiting for the moment he would see his daughter. The orchestra began to play, a simple melody, something classical arranged for young musicians. The curtain parted slowly, and there she was. Lily stood in the center of the group, her dark hair braided neatly. When had she fixed it? Had one of the teachers helped her? Wearing the pink tutu she had chosen herself at the store 3 weeks ago. Her feet were positioned in what must have been first position, her arms raised in a graceful arc above her head. She looked exactly like her mother. Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. For a moment, he wasn't in a gymnasium watching a first-grade recital. He was in a small apartment 5 years ago, watching Sarah dance around the living room with Lily in her arms, both of them laughing, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. The music swelled. The children began to move. And Lily, his Lily, the baby girl who had cried for 3 straight months after Sarah died, who had asked every night for a year when Mommy was coming home, who had finally stopped asking but never stopped missing her, Lily began to dance. She was beautiful. Not perfect, not technically precise, but beautiful in the way that only a child can be, with complete abandon and absolute joy. She twirled and leaped and moved her arms in patterns she had practiced 100 times, and every movement was filled with happiness. Halfway through the number, she looked out at the audience. Ethan saw her eyes scanning the crowd, searching. He raised his hand, waving just enough to catch her attention. Her face lit up. She didn't stop dancing, didn't miss a beat, but her smile transformed from performance to genuine delight. She had found him. He was there. He had kept his promise. Ethan felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. After the recital, after the chaos of finding Lily in the crowded hallway, after the endless stream of "Daddy, did you see?" and "Did you like the twirly part?" They drove home through streets that were beginning to shimmer with the first hints of frost. Lily chattered the whole way about Maya's cat, about Miss Martinez saying she did a wonderful job, about how she had been nervous until she saw her daddy in the audience, and then everything was okay. Ethan listened and nodded and made all the right sounds, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation in the conference room. I didn't have anyone who told me it was okay to choose my family over my work. And I wish someone had. Who was Claire Harrington, really? What had made her the way she was? Brilliant and demanding and so carefully armored against the world? What scars was she hiding behind that perfect exterior? They arrived home at 8:30. Ethan made Lily a quick dinner, macaroni and cheese from a box, which she declared the best meal ever, and then guided her through the bedtime routine. Bath, pajamas, teeth brushing, 2 stories instead of 1 because it was a special night. Finally, she was in bed, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Thank you for coming." She reached up and touched his face with her small hand. "I saw you crying. Mommy always said happy tears are the best kind." Ethan pressed his lips to her forehead. "They are, baby. They really are." "Will you come to my next one too?" "Every single one. I promise." She smiled, that gap-toothed, heartbreaking smile, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter, the girl he had almost missed. The girl he would have missed if not for a CEO who had shown him unexpected grace. Tomorrow, he would go back to work. There would be follow-up meetings and strategy sessions, and all the 1,000 small tasks that made up his professional life. There would be questions about why he had missed the dinner, conversations with colleagues who didn't understand, and somewhere in that building there would be Claire Harrington, a woman who had everything, power, success, respect, and who had still looked at him with sadness in her eyes when she told him to go home to his child. What happened today would change things. He didn't know how, didn't know what the consequences would be, but he felt it with absolute certainty. Something had shifted, something had begun. And nothing, not the numbers, not the board, not the careful walls they both had built around their hearts, would ever be quite the same again. The morning after the recital arrived with a gray sky and the kind of silence that settles over a city before the first commuters begin their daily migration. Ethan woke before his alarm, his mind already racing through the implications of what had happened the day before. He had skipped the most important networking dinner of the year. He had done so with Claire Harrington's blessing, and he had no idea what today would bring. Lily was still asleep when he checked on her, Mr. Whiskers clutched against her chest, her face peaceful in the early light. He watched her for a moment, remembering the way she had looked on that stage, the joy in her eyes when she found him in the audience. Whatever happened at work today, that moment had been worth it. The drive to the office felt different than usual. The same streets, the same traffic, the same glass tower rising against the skyline. But something had shifted in the way Ethan perceived it all. Yesterday, he had been a man desperately clinging to his place in the corporate hierarchy, terrified of making a single wrong move. Today, he felt strangely calm. He had made his choice. He had chosen his daughter over his career, and the sky hadn't fallen. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Ethan stepped into a world that felt both familiar and foreign. Colleagues nodded at him as he passed, but their expressions were harder to read than usual. Had word spread about his absence from the dinner? Were people judging him, or was he simply imagining their scrutiny? Marcus intercepted him before he reached his desk. "You're alive. I wasn't sure you would be." "Barely." Ethan managed a small smile. "How bad is it?" "The dinner? It was fine. Boring speeches, mediocre food, the usual." Marcus fell into step beside him. "But people noticed you weren't there." David Chang made a comment about how some people don't understand the importance of commitment to the company. "David Chang can go to hell." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's new. What happened to careful, cautious Ethan who never makes waves?" He went to his daughter's recital instead of kissing up to board members. Ethan dropped into his chair and powered on his computer. And apparently Claire Harrington told him to. "Wait, what?" Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Claire told you to skip the dinner? The Claire Harrington? Ice Queen of the 43rd floor?" "The same. Why would she do that?" Ethan thought about the conversation in the conference room, about the sadness in Claire's eyes when she talked about her father, about the way her voice had softened when she told him to go home to Lily. Those were things he wasn't ready to share, not even with Marcus. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not going to question it." The morning passed in a blur of emails and phone calls. The board presentation had been a success. That much was clear from the congratulatory messages flooding his inbox. Several board members had specifically mentioned his contribution, praising his transparency and strategic thinking. One message, from the silver-haired man who had asked about the 12%, suggested they meet for coffee sometime to discuss his career trajectory. It was everything Ethan had hoped for, everything he had worked toward for years. So why did he feel like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop? The answer came at 11:45, in the form of an email from Claire's assistant. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Harrington requests your presence in her office at noon. Please confirm your availability." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment before typing his reply. Confirmed. The walk to the 43rd floor felt longer than usual. Each step brought him closer to a conversation he couldn't predict, with a woman he had thought he understood, but clearly didn't. The Claire Harrington he had worked under for 4 years was demanding, cold, and utterly focused on results. The Claire Harrington who had told him to go to his daughter's recital was someone else entirely. Her assistant waved him through without a word. The door to Claire's office was open, and he could see her standing at the window, silhouetted against the gray sky. She didn't turn when he entered. "Close the door, Mr. Cole." He did as instructed, then stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, unsure whether to sit or remain standing. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of climate control and the muffled sounds of the city far below. "How was the recital?" Claire asked, still facing the window. "It was wonderful." Ethan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "She was wonderful. Thank you for letting me go." "I didn't let you do anything. I simply pointed out that you had a choice." Claire finally turned to face him, and he was struck again by how different she looked from the CEO he had known. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday, a tightness in her jaw that suggested sleepless hours. "We always have choices, Mr. Cole." Most of us just pretend we don't. Is everything all right? The question came out before he could stop it, and he immediately regretted the presumption. This was his boss, not his friend. He had no right to inquire about her well-being. But Claire didn't seem offended. If anything, she looked almost grateful for the question. Sit down, Ethan. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. He took the chair across from her desk, the same one he had occupied yesterday when she had asked him about the 12%. Claire remained standing, pacing slowly behind her desk, her fingers trailing along its polished surface. I've been CEO of this company for 7 years, she began. In that time, I've made Harrington Financial one of the most successful firms in the industry. We've tripled our assets under management, expanded into 6 new markets, and survived 2 economic downturns that destroyed our competitors. It's an impressive record. It's an exhausting one. Claire stopped pacing and met his eyes. Do you know what it costs to maintain that kind of success, Ethan? What you have to sacrifice? He thought about Sarah, about all the evenings he had missed with her because of late meetings and early deadlines, about Lily growing up with a father who was always distracted, always worried about the next quarter's numbers. I think I have some idea. No, you don't. The words were sharp but not cruel. You have a daughter you adore and colleagues who respect you. You have relationships, connections, a life outside these walls. I have, she gestured at the office around her. This, a corner office and a reputation for being untouchable. That's it. That's all I've allowed myself to have. Claire, I don't understand why you're telling me this. She was quiet for a moment, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. Yesterday, when you stood up in front of that board and told them the truth about our numbers, do you know what I felt? Terrified that I was about to destroy the presentation? The corner of her mouth twitched. No, I felt relieved. For the first time in years, someone in this company had the courage to be honest, even when it might have cost them everything. She sat down in her chair, and suddenly she looked smaller, more human. I'm tired, Ethan. Tired of pretending the numbers are always perfect. Tired of acting like I have all the answers. Tired of being the ice queen everyone fears but no one knows. People don't fear you, Ethan said, though even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't entirely true. Yes, they do, and I've cultivated that fear deliberately. It's easier, easier to be feared than to be known. Easier to keep everyone at arm's length than to risk letting them see who you really are. Who are you really? The question hung in the air between them. Claire held his gaze for a long moment, and he saw something shift in her expression. A door opening, just a crack, to whatever lay behind those carefully constructed walls. I'm someone who made a choice a long time ago, she said quietly. A choice to put my career above everything else, above relationships, above family, above my own happiness. I told myself it was necessary, that success required sacrifice, that I could have everything I wanted once I reached the top. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The joke is that there is no top. There's always another goal, another achievement, another reason to keep climbing while your life passes you by. Ethan didn't know what to say. This wasn't a conversation between a CEO and her subordinate. This was something else entirely, something raw and honest and painfully human. Why are you telling me this? He asked again, more gently this time. Because yesterday you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Claire leaned forward, her elbows on the desk, her hands clasped in front of her. You reminded me that work isn't everything, that there are things worth more than promotions and profit margins, that missing your daughter's recital to attend a dinner with people who barely know your name isn't a sacrifice worth making. I almost made that sacrifice. I would have if you hadn't told me to go. I know. That's why I'm telling you this now. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was steadier. There's going to be a restructuring announcement next week. The board approved it last night. Several positions are being eliminated, and several new ones are being created. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Restructuring was corporate code for layoffs, for careers ended without warning, for families thrown into chaos because someone in a corner office decided the numbers would look better with fewer names on the payroll. The position of Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning is being created, Claire continued. It's a significant promotion, with commensurate compensation and responsibilities. The board has asked me to recommend a candidate. And you're recommending me? I'm considering it. She held up a hand before he could respond. But I want you to understand what that position would mean. More hours, more pressure, more nights when you have to choose between your daughter and your career. She paused, letting the words sink in. I won't make that choice for you, Ethan. I can't. But I want you to make it with your eyes open, knowing exactly what you'd be giving up. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Ethan thought about the promotion he had wanted for so long, the financial security it would provide, the opportunities it would create for Lily's future. But he also thought about last night, about watching his daughter dance, about the tears streaming down his face as she smiled at him from the stage. Can I think about it? He asked finally. Of course. Take the weekend. We'll talk Monday. Claire stood, signaling that the meeting was over. But as Ethan rose to leave, she spoke again. Ethan? He turned at the door. Thank you, she said, for being honest with me, both yesterday and today. Thank you for giving me permission to be a father. Something flickered across her face, gratitude perhaps, or something deeper. I didn't give you permission. I just reminded you that you already had it. He nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. As he walked back to his desk, his mind churning with everything she had said, he couldn't shake the feeling that their conversation had been about more than just a promotion. Claire Harrington was reaching out in her own guarded way, and he had no idea what to do about it. The afternoon brought a steady stream of work that demanded his attention. Reports needed reviewing, meetings needed attending, and the constant flow of emails required responses that couldn't wait. But beneath the surface of his professional focus, Ethan's thoughts kept drifting back to Claire. He had worked at Harrington Financial for 4 years, and in that time, he had never once heard Claire Harrington admit to doubt, exhaustion, or regret. She was famous for her composure, her unshakable confidence, her ability to make decisions that affected thousands of lives without ever seeming to second-guess herself. The woman he had spoken to today was someone different, someone vulnerable, someone who was asking for something she couldn't put into words. At 3 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a text from the school. Reminder, parent-teacher conferences next Thursday, 4 to 7 p.m. Please schedule your appointment online. Parent-teacher conferences. Another evening event, another potential conflict with work. But this time, Ethan didn't feel the familiar surge of anxiety. He simply added the event to his calendar and made a mental note to schedule his appointment early, before the good slots filled up. Whatever decision he made about the promotion, he wasn't going to make it the way he had been making decisions for the past 2 years. He wasn't going to sacrifice his daughter's childhood on the altar of career advancement. If that meant saying no to the SVP position, then that's what it meant. But as the day wore on, he found himself hoping it wouldn't come to that. The promotion wasn't just about money or status. It was about having more control over his schedule, more ability to delegate, more power to shape the department in ways that didn't require constant personal sacrifice. If he could make that case to Claire, if he could show her that the position didn't have to mean giving up his family, the thought stopped him cold. Why did he care what Claire thought? She was his boss, nothing more. Her approval shouldn't matter beyond its professional implications, but somehow, in the space of 24 hours, something had changed. He had seen behind the mask, and he couldn't pretend he hadn't. At 5:30, Marcus stopped by his desk. You look like a man with a lot on his mind. You could say that. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Claire offered me the SVP position, sort of. Sort of? She offered to recommend me to the board, but she also warned me about the cost. More hours, more pressure, more nights away from Lily. Marcus whistled low. That's surprisingly honest for her. She's surprisingly honest in general when you get past the Ice Queen act. Is that what you're doing? Getting past the act? The question made Ethan uncomfortable in ways he didn't want to examine. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that she's not who I thought she was. Be careful, Ethan. Marcus's voice was serious now, all trace of teasing gone. Claire Harrington has destroyed careers before. Men who thought they understood her, who got too close, who forgot that she's the CEO and they're just employees. Don't become another cautionary tale. I'm not going to become anything. I'm just trying to figure out whether to take the promotion. Right. Marcus didn't look convinced. Just remember what you have to lose. Lily needs her father, not some guy who's too busy playing corporate politics to show up for her life. After Marcus left, Ethan sat alone at his desk, staring at the blank computer screen. His friend's warning echoed in his mind, mixing with Claire's words from earlier, with the memory of Lily dancing on the stage, with the impossible complexity of trying to be everything to everyone. He was still sitting there when his phone rang, an unfamiliar number with the office's internal extension prefix. He answered automatically. "Mr. Cole, this is Jennifer, Ms. Harrington's assistant. Ms. Harrington has asked if you could come to her office immediately. There's an urgent matter she needs to discuss." "Now? It's almost 6. "Yes, sir. She said it's important." The walk back to the 43rd floor felt different this time. The office was emptying out, the usual bustle of activity giving way to the quiet hum of cleaning staff beginning their evening rounds. The floor that housed Claire's office was nearly deserted, the lights in most offices already dimmed. Jennifer was waiting at her desk when he arrived, looking flustered in a way that seemed uncharacteristic. "She's expecting you. Go on in." Ethan knocked on the door but heard no response. He knocked again, then, when silence continued, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. The office was empty. He stepped inside, confused. Jennifer had said Claire was expecting him, but the chair behind the desk was vacant, the computer dark. He was about to turn and leave when he heard a sound coming from the small private bathroom that adjoined Claire's office. A sound that made him freeze. Someone was crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, suppressed weeping of someone trying desperately not to be heard. Someone who had retreated to the only truly private space available and was allowing themselves, finally, to break. Every instinct told Ethan to leave, to pretend he hadn't heard anything, to wait outside until Claire composed herself, to maintain the professional distance that had defined their relationship for 4 years. But something stronger held him in place. The memory of her voice that morning, raw with exhaustion and loneliness. The way she had looked at him when she talked about her father never coming to her performances. He crossed the office and stopped in front of the bathroom door. "Claire?" The crying stopped abruptly. Silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10, 20. "Go away." Her voice was muffled, strained. "I didn't call for you. There was a mistake. Jennifer said you needed to see me urgently. She was wrong. Leave, please." But Ethan didn't leave. Instead, he did something that would change both their lives forever, though he couldn't know it then. He reached for the handle. The door wasn't locked. It swung open before he could think better of it, before he could consider the consequences, before his rational mind could override the instinct that had propelled him forward. Claire was standing at the sink, her back to the door, her hands gripping the marble counter. She had removed her blazer, leaving only a white silk blouse that was partially untucked, the fabric disheveled in a way that spoke of distress rather than carelessness. Her head was bowed, her shoulders rigid with tension. "I said leave." Her voice was ice, but beneath it, he could hear the tremor she was trying to hide. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. It's nothing. Now please, for your own sake, get out of this room." But Ethan's eyes had already found what she was trying to hide. The mirror above the sink reflected her image, and in that reflection he could see what her turned back concealed. The silk blouse had slipped off one shoulder, whether from her distress or some previous movement, and beneath it, scars. Thick, raised ridges of damaged tissue that crawled across her upper back and shoulder blade, like the aftermath of something catastrophic. Some were old and white, faded by years. Others looked newer, pink and angry, as though the injury had happened more recently than its companions. Claire's eyes met his in the mirror. For one endless moment, they stared at each other, her face frozen in horror, his in shock. Then she moved, yanking the fabric up to cover herself, her hands shaking so violently that she couldn't manage the buttons she was trying to fasten. A sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a gasp, and Ethan watched the most powerful woman he had ever known crumble in front of him. "Get out!" The words were barely a whisper now. Please just go." "Claire, don't." She spun to face him, her back pressed against the sink, her arms wrapped around herself as though she could hold together by sheer force of will. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mascara smeared, all pretense of composure shattered. "Don't say anything. Don't ask questions. Just leave and pretend this never happened. I can't do that. You can. You will. Because if you don't, I'll destroy your career. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Her voice broke, and the threats dissolved into something that looked terrifyingly close to despair. I'll do whatever I have to do. I can't let anyone know. I can't. She slid down the cabinet until she was sitting on the floor, her knees drawn up to her chest, her face hidden in her hands. The CEO of Harrington Financial, the woman who commanded thousands of employees and billions in assets, was curled up on a bathroom floor, weeping. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, every professional instinct screaming at him to run, to protect himself, to pretend he had never seen any of this. But he couldn't move. He couldn't leave her like this, shattered and alone. Her deepest secret exposed to someone who should have been nothing more than a subordinate. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to the floor beside her. Not touching, not crowding, just present. Close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly, and I'm not going to tell anyone. Whatever happened to you, whatever those scars mean, that's your story to tell or not tell. But right now, you don't have to be the CEO. You don't have to be strong. You can just be human. Claire didn't respond. She remained hunched over, her body shaking with silent sobs, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Ethan sat beside her, watching the light fade outside the office windows, listening to her ragged breathing slowly even out. Finally, she raised her head. Her face was streaked with tears and ruined makeup, her eyes swollen, her lips trembling. She looked nothing like the Claire Harrington the world knew. She looked broken, vulnerable, and utterly beautiful in her raw humanity. 15 years, she said, her voice hoarse. I've hidden them for 15 years. No one at this company has ever seen. No one in my life has ever... She trailed off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Why didn't you leave? Any sane person would have left. I'm not any person. A laugh escaped her, harsh and wet. No, you're not. She wiped at her face with shaking hands, only succeeding in smearing the mascara further. You're going to ask. Everyone asks eventually. I'm not going to ask anything. Not unless you want to tell me. She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw something shift in her expression. The terror and shame were still there, but beneath them something else was emerging. Gratitude, perhaps. Or the beginning of trust. I was 23, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Working my first job out of college, trying to prove myself in a world that didn't think much of young women in finance. There was a man, a mentor, or so I thought, someone who promised to help me advance, to teach me everything I needed to know. She paused, and Ethan saw her hands clench into fists. He was patient, charming. Everyone loved him, and when he started asking me to stay late to meet him alone, to keep our special relationship secret, I thought I was lucky. I thought I was being chosen. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. One night, he crossed a line. I said no. I tried to leave. Claire's voice had gone flat, emotionless, as though she were reciting facts from a report rather than reliving trauma. He didn't take rejection well. There was a fight, a lamp, hot oil. Claire, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say you're sorry. Don't say it wasn't my fault. Don't say any of the things people always say. I've heard them all, and none of them change what happened. What do you want me to say? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just needed someone to finally know, to see me, the real me, scars and all, and not run away. I'm not running. I noticed. She studied him with those sharp green eyes, now softened by tears. Why? You have every reason to use this against me. To leverage it for your career, to prove that the Ice Queen has a weakness after all. Why aren't you trying to protect yourself? Ethan thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. Because I know what it's like to hide pain, he said slowly. When Sarah died, everyone expected me to fall apart. They expected grief, tears, visible suffering that they could witness and then dismiss. But that's not how it worked. My pain was quiet, private. Something I carried alone because I didn't know how to share it. He met her eyes. Seeing you like this, seeing what you've been carrying all these years, it doesn't make me think less of you, Claire. It makes me understand you. Maybe for the first time. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't try to hide them. Sarah was your wife? Yes. Well, what was she like? No one had asked him that in 2 years. Everyone asked how she died, how Lily was coping, how he was managing. No one asked about who she was. She was stubborn, he said, and felt himself smile despite everything. Stubborn and kind and completely incapable of following a recipe. Every meal was an adventure. Half the time it was inedible, but she always presented it with such pride that we ate it anyway. That sounds lovely. It was. She made our little apartment feel like a palace. She made Lily feel like the most special child in the world. She made me feel like I could be more than I ever thought possible. His voice caught. And then she was gone. And all I had left were memories and a 6-year-old who didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. They sat in silence for a while. 2 broken people on a bathroom floor, the weight of their shared pain creating a connection that neither had expected or sought. Finally, Claire spoke. I should clean up. The cleaning staff will be on this floor soon, and I can only imagine the rumors if they found us like this. She rose to her feet, and Ethan followed. They stood facing each other in the small space, closer than they had ever been before. Thank you, Claire said, for not running, for not asking, for just being here. Thank you for trusting me. She laughed softly. I didn't trust you. You barged in without permission. Trust wasn't involved. Maybe that's when it matters most, when we don't have time to build walls. Claire reached out and touched his arm, just briefly, her fingers light against his sleeve. Go home to your daughter, Ethan. Hold her tight. Tell her you love her. What about the restructuring, the promotion? That can wait. Everything can wait. She stepped back, already gathering the fragments of her composure, already rebuilding the walls that had protected her for 15 years. We'll talk next week. Right now I need to remember how to be Claire Harrington again. Ethan nodded and turned to leave. At the door he paused. Claire? Yes? You don't have to be that person all the time, the one everyone fears, the one who has all the answers. He met her eyes. You can be this person too, the one who feels things, the one who needs someone to sit with her on the floor. Something crossed her face, hope maybe, or the shadow of it. Maybe, she said, someday. He left her standing in the dim light of her office, surrounded by the trappings of her success, but looking more alone than anyone he had ever seen. The drive home felt endless. Ethan gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead, his mind replaying the events of the past hour. The scars, the tears, the story of a young woman betrayed by someone she trusted, the way Claire had looked when she finally let herself be seen. He thought about Marcus's warning. Don't become another cautionary tale. Good advice, probably. Smart advice. The kind of advice he should follow. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Claire sitting on that floor, broken and beautiful, and he knew that smart advice had nothing to do with what came next. The weekend passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary after everything that had happened. Ethan took Lily to the park on Saturday morning, pushing her on the swings while autumn leaves swirled around them in colors of fire and gold. He made pancakes for breakfast on Sunday, the kind with chocolate chips that Sarah used to make, and watched his daughter devour them with maple syrup dripping down her chin. He read her stories at bedtime, held her close when she talked about missing Mommy, and tried to be present in ways he had been too distracted to manage before. But beneath the surface of these peaceful hours, his mind kept returning to Claire, to the scars that crawled across her back like a map of suffering, to the way her voice had broken when she told him about the mentor who had betrayed her, to the look in her eyes when he refused to leave her alone on that bathroom floor. He hadn't told anyone what had happened, not Marcus, not his mother when she called to check on Lily, not the empty space beside him in bed where he sometimes still talked to Sarah. This secret felt too fragile to share, too important to risk with careless words. Claire had trusted him with something she had hidden for 15 years, and he would protect that trust, even if it meant carrying the weight alone. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of all Monday mornings, gray and demanding and full of obligations that couldn't be postponed. Ethan dropped Lily at school with an extra long hug, and a promise to pick her up on time, then drove to the office with his stomach tight with anticipation. He had no idea what to expect from Claire. Would she pretend Friday night had never happened? Would she avoid him entirely? Or would something have shifted between them, some new understanding that changed the nature of their relationship? The answer came sooner than he expected. He was barely at his desk, still settling his bag and powering on his computer, when Jennifer appeared beside him. Claire's assistant looked nervous in a way that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Harrington would like to see you in her office, immediately." "Is everything all right?" Jennifer's expression flickered. "I think she should tell you herself." The walk to the 43rd floor felt different this time. The same elevator, the same hallway, the same door with Claire's name in gold letters. But Ethan approached it with a new awareness of what lay behind that polished facade. Not just a corner office and a powerful CEO, but a woman who had been hurt, who had hidden that hurt for years, who had finally let someone see her truth. He knocked and waited. "Come in." Claire was standing behind her desk, not sitting, her posture rigid with tension. She was wearing a dark blue dress that covered her from neck to wrist, armor in fabric form, and her hair was pulled back in the severe style she favored for important meetings. But her eyes told a different story. They were softer than he had ever seen them, shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked almost like fear. "Close the door, please." He did, then stood waiting, unsure whether to sit or remain standing, unsure of everything except the strange certainty that his life was about to change again. "I've been thinking all weekend," Claire began, her voice carefully controlled. "About what happened Friday night, about what you saw, about what I told you." "Claire, you don't have to explain." "Yes, I do." She held up a hand to stop him. "Please, let me finish." He nodded and remained silent. "I've spent 15 years building walls, 15 years making sure no one got close enough to see the real me. 15 years convincing myself that vulnerability was weakness, that showing pain was dangerous, that the only way to survive in this world was to become untouchable." She paused, her throat working. "And then you walked through that door and saw everything. Everything I've hidden, everything I've been ashamed of, everything I've used to justify keeping the world at arm's length. I don't think less of you for it. I hope you know that. I do know that. That's what's so terrifying." Claire moved around her desk, closer to where he stood, but stopped several feet away, maintaining distance even as she bridged it. "You saw me at my worst, Ethan. Broken, crying, sitting on the floor like a child. And you didn't run. You sat down beside me and stayed. It seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing to do was protect yourself. To leave before you saw too much, before you became entangled in my mess. The right thing to do was think about your career, your daughter, your own well-being." Her voice cracked slightly. "But you stayed anyway. I couldn't leave you like that. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself." Claire studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she did something that surprised him. She sat down, not behind her desk but in one of the chairs meant for visitors, and gestured for him to take the seat beside her. When he did, they were facing each other as equals, without the barrier of furniture or hierarchy between them. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone in years." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She took a deep breath. "The man who did this to me, he didn't just disappear. He didn't face consequences or lose his career. He went on to become one of the most successful executives in the industry. He's on boards of major companies. He gives speeches about leadership and mentorship. He's celebrated as a visionary." Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "He's still out there?" "Still out there, still powerful, still charming everyone who meets him." Claire's voice was bitter. "I reported what happened, you know. Went to HR, went to the police, went through every official channel. And do you know what happened? Nothing. There wasn't enough evidence, they said. It was my word against his, they said. Maybe I had misunderstood his intentions, they said. That's not right. No, it isn't. But it's reality. The reality that women in this industry face every day, especially back then." She looked down at her hands. "So I made a choice. I decided that if the system wouldn't protect me, I would protect myself. I would become so powerful, so successful, so untouchable that no one could ever hurt me again." I built Harrington Financial as a fortress, with myself as the general who never shows weakness. And it worked. Worked too well. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I became exactly what I needed to be to survive. Cold, demanding, impossible to get close to, and somewhere along the way I forgot how to be anything else. Ethan was quiet for a moment, absorbing everything she had said. The story made sense of so much: the Ice Queen reputation, the relentless drive, the careful distance she maintained from everyone around her. It wasn't cruelty or arrogance, it was armor, forged in the fires of betrayal and maintained at tremendous cost. "What changed?" he asked finally. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because of you." The words came out simply, without drama or artifice. "Because you showed me something I'd forgotten was possible. You chose your daughter over the dinner. You told the truth to the board even when it was risky. You stayed with me when anyone else would have run." She met his eyes. "You reminded me that not everyone is a threat, that not everyone will hurt me if I let them close." "Claire, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I'm not trying to create an obligation or manipulate you. I just needed you to understand why what happened Friday was so significant. You're the first person in 15 years who's seen those scars, the first person who's seen me fall apart. And the way you handled it," her voice trembled, "it matters. More than you know." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Ethan wanted to reach out and take her hand, to offer some physical comfort, but he held back, uncertain of the boundaries that still existed between them. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we go back to work." Claire's voice was steadier, but he could hear the effort behind it. "The board presentation was successful. The restructuring moves forward. You're still being considered for the SVP position. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to." "But something has changed." "Yes." She held his gaze. "Something has changed, whether we acknowledge it or not." Before either of them could say more, Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted, the personal moment giving way to professional necessity. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes, the follow-up with the board members who wanted additional information." She stood, and instantly she was Claire Harrington again, CEO, leader, the woman who commanded empires. But beneath the surface, Ethan could now see the cracks. "We should talk more, later, when there's time." "I'd like that." She nodded, a small gesture that carried more weight than words. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." He left her office with his mind spinning and his heart doing something it hadn't done in years, something dangerous and hopeful and completely unexpected. The morning passed in a haze. Ethan went through the motions of his work, attending meetings and answering emails and reviewing reports, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Claire, to the pain in her eyes when she talked about the man who had hurt her, to the way her voice had softened when she said his name, to the question that now hung over everything: what exactly was happening between them? Marcus noticed his distraction during their lunch break. "You've been somewhere else all morning. Everything okay?" "Just tired. Didn't sleep well this weekend." "Thinking about the promotion?" "Among other things." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying his friend with the kind of attention that made Ethan uncomfortable. "You know, I've been watching you since that board presentation. Something's different. You seem, I don't know, less afraid." "Less afraid of what?" "Everything. This place, your career, Claire Harrington." Marcus paused significantly on the last name. "You used to be terrified of her. Now you walk into her office like you're visiting an old friend. She's not as scary as people think." "Ethan," Marcus's voice dropped. "What's going on? And don't tell me nothing, because I've known you for 3 years and you've never been this bad at hiding things." Ethan hesitated. He had promised Claire nothing, made no explicit commitment to secrecy, but sharing what had happened felt like a betrayal nonetheless. "I can't talk about it, not yet, maybe not ever." "Is it something that could hurt you?" "No, at least I don't think so." "Is it something that could hurt Claire?" The question struck a nerve. Ethan thought about the scars, the tears, the 15 years of secrets. Yes, it could hurt Claire. If the wrong people found out, if the story became office gossip, if her carefully constructed armor was stripped away in front of people who would use her vulnerability as a weapon. I'm not going to let that happen, he said quietly. Marcus's eyebrows rose. That's not the answer I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Not that. Not you being protective of the woman who's famous for eating employees alive. Marcus shook his head slowly. Whatever's happening, be careful. I mean it. Claire Harrington is not someone you want to get tangled up with emotionally. I know. Do you? Because the way you're talking about her, the way you look when her name comes up, it seems like maybe you don't. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Maybe because there wasn't one. Maybe because the truth was too complicated to explain, even to himself. The afternoon brought the kind of crushing workload that left no room for personal reflection. The restructuring announcement was scheduled for Thursday, which meant 3 days of frantic preparation. New org charts needed finalizing, talking points needed drafting, 1,000 details needed attention, each one urgent, each one demanding focus that Ethan struggled to maintain. By 5 o'clock, his desk was covered in papers and his computer screen was filled with overlapping windows of spreadsheets and documents. The office around him was beginning to empty as colleagues headed home to families and dinners and lives outside these walls. He should be doing the same. Lily was waiting at after-school care, expecting him to pick her up by 6. But there was one more thing he needed to do first. He found Claire in conference room B, alone at the long table, surrounded by documents and the remnants of what must have been a difficult day. Her blazer was draped over a chair, her hair had escaped its careful arrangement, and she looked exhausted in a way that made his chest ache. "You're still here," she said when she saw him in the doorway. "I thought everyone had gone home." "Almost everyone. I wanted to check on you before I left." "Check on me?" She managed a tired smile. "I'm the CEO, Ethan. I'm supposed to be the one checking on everyone else. Even CEOs need someone to ask how they're doing." He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "How are you doing? Really?" Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of a document she wasn't reading. "I've been better. This restructuring is complicated. There are people who are going to lose their jobs, and no matter how necessary it is, that weighs on me. I know the feeling. Every name on those lists is someone's livelihood, someone's family." "Exactly." She looked up at him. "But that's not what you're really asking, is it?" "No. You're asking about this morning, about everything I told you. I'm asking about you, Claire, the person, not the CEO." The distinction seemed to catch her off guard. She sat back in her chair, her professional posture softening into something more human. "I don't know how to answer that. I've spent so long being the CEO that I'm not sure who the person is anymore. She's the woman who cried on the bathroom floor, the woman who let me stay when she had every reason to push me away, the woman who's sitting here alone at 5 o'clock, surrounded by papers, looking like she needs someone to talk to. That's quite a portrait." "It's what I see." Claire was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something he couldn't identify. "Sit down, Ethan. Please." He took the chair beside her, close enough that he could see the fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. "I've been thinking about what you said this morning," she began slowly, "about how something has changed between us. You're right, it has. But I'm not sure what to do about it." "What do you want to do about it?" "That's the problem. I don't know what I want." She laughed softly without humor. "For 15 years, I've known exactly what I wanted. Success, power, protection, everything I've built has been in service of those goals. And now," she trailed off, shaking her head. "Now? Now someone sees me, really sees me, and instead of feeling exposed, I feel," she struggled for the word, "relieved, like I've been holding my breath for 15 years, and finally someone gave me permission to exhale." Ethan felt his heart rate quicken. This was dangerous territory, the kind of emotional intimacy that could complicate everything, but he couldn't walk away from it. Not now. "I see you," he said quietly. "The person behind the armor. And I'm not running." "Why?" The question was almost a whisper. "Why don't you run? Why don't you protect yourself like everyone else does?" "Because I know what it's like to be alone with pain. After Sarah died, I was surrounded by people, by family, and friends and colleagues who all meant well, but none of them really saw me. They saw a grieving widower, a single father struggling to hold things together. They didn't see the nights I spent crying after Lily went to sleep. They didn't see the anger I felt, the rage at a universe that would take her mother before she was old enough to remember her. They didn't see any of it because I was too busy being strong for everyone else. Claire's eyes glistened. Until me. Until you. You're the first person I've talked to about Sarah since she died. Really talked to, not just the surface grief that people expect. He paused, gathering his courage. Maybe that's why I couldn't leave you on Friday, because I recognized something in you, something that said you needed what I needed, someone to witness the pain without trying to fix it. The silence that followed was charged with something neither of them could name. They sat in the dim light of the conference room, surrounded by the evidence of professional obligations, yet somehow completely removed from that world. My father died 6 months ago, Claire said suddenly. Did you know that? No, I'm sorry. Don't be. He wasn't a good man, successful, yes, respected in his industry, but he was cold, distant, more interested in his portfolio than his daughter. She took a shaky breath. I told myself I didn't care, that I had long since stopped needing his approval. But when he died, something broke in me. All those years of pretending I didn't need him, all that armor I'd built, and it turned out none of it was real. I was still that little girl on the stage, looking out at the audience, hoping to see her father in the front row. And he was never there. Never, not once. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. The scars on my back are from a man who hurt me, but the scars on my heart are from a man who simply never showed up. Ethan reached out and took her hand. It was a small gesture, barely more than fingers touching, but Claire's reaction was as though he had offered her the world. She gripped his hand tightly, her eyes closing, her whole body trembling with the force of emotion she had suppressed for far too long. "I'm here," he said. "I'm showing up." They stayed like that for several minutes, hands clasped, breathing slowly, letting the weight of shared pain become something lighter, something bearable. The conference room around them faded into insignificance, the documents and deadlines forgotten in the face of something more essential. Finally, Claire opened her eyes. "Your daughter, you need to pick her up." "She can wait a few more minutes." "No." Claire pulled her hand away gently but firmly. "She can't. That's the whole point, isn't it? The lesson you taught me. The people we love shouldn't have to wait for us to finish being important." "Claire, go, Ethan. Be her father. Be the father I never had." She managed a watery smile. "I'll be fine. I've been fine for 15 years. A few more hours won't kill me." He wanted to argue, wanted to stay, wanted to find the words that would bridge the gap between what they were feeling and what they were allowed to do about it. But she was right. Lily was waiting. Lily needed him. And whatever was happening with Claire, it couldn't come at the expense of his daughter. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow." She nodded. "Now go. Before I do something unprofessional, like ask you to stay." He stood and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, Claire, I would have stayed if you'd asked." Her smile was the saddest, most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I know, that's what makes it so hard to let you leave." He drove to the after-school care center in a daze, his mind replaying every moment of that conversation. The tears on Claire's face, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she had looked at him when she said she wanted him to stay. What was happening? What were they doing? She was his boss, his superior, the woman who held his career in her hands. Getting emotionally involved with her was professional suicide, the kind of mistake that destroyed careers and reputations. Every rational part of his brain was screaming warnings, but rationality had nothing to do with the ache in his chest when he thought about her alone in that conference room. Nothing to do with the way his heart rate spiked every time she said his name. Nothing to do with the certainty, growing stronger by the hour, that something profound was happening between them. Lily was waiting at the front desk when he arrived, her backpack clutched in both hands, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Daddy, you're late!" "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." He scooped her into his arms and held her close, breathing in the scent of school cafeteria and playground dirt that clung to her hair. "How was your day?" "Good. Maya let me pet Professor Whiskers at lunch." "He's so fluffy, Daddy. Can we get a cat?" "Maybe someday, Lilybug. Let's get home first." The evening routine unfolded with its usual chaos: dinner, bath, homework that was more coloring than actual work, the negotiations over bedtime that Lily always won. By 8 o'clock, she was tucked into bed with Mr. Whiskers under her arm, her eyes drooping as Ethan read her the last chapter of her current favorite book. "Daddy?" she murmured as he closed the book. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Are you sad?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Your face looks sad, like when you think about Mommy." Out of the mouths of babes. Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I'm okay, Lily. Just tired." "Maybe you need a hug." "Maybe I do." She wrapped her small arms around his neck and squeezed with all her strength. "There. Now you're not sad anymore." "You're right. I'm not." He stayed with her until she fell asleep, watching her peaceful face in the nightlight's glow, wondering at the resilience of children. She had lost her mother, suffered through months of confusion and grief, and yet here she was, offering comfort to her father with the simple conviction that a hug could fix anything. Maybe she was right. Maybe love really was that simple. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number, but he recognized it instantly. The same internal extension that had summoned him to Claire's office on Friday. "Thank you for today, for listening, for staying as long as you could. I don't know what's happening between us, but I know it matters. That's more than I've been able to say about anything personal in a very long time." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed his reply. "It matters to me too. Get some sleep, Claire. Tomorrow is a new day." Her response came almost immediately. "For the first time in years, I'm actually looking forward to tomorrow. Good night, Ethan." He put the phone away and sat in the dim hallway outside Lily's room, listening to her soft breathing, thinking about the woman on the other end of that message. Two broken people, each carrying their own scars, finding something unexpected in each other. It was terrifying. It was unprofessional. It was probably the worst idea he'd had in years. And he couldn't wait for tomorrow. Tuesday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made the world feel new, even when nothing about it had actually changed. Ethan woke before his alarm, a habit that had become familiar over the past few days, and lay in bed listening to the quiet sounds of the apartment settling around him. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Closer, he could hear Lily's soft breathing through the wall that separated their rooms. He had dreamed of Claire, not in any dramatic or revelatory way, just a simple image of her sitting across from him at a table, talking about something he couldn't quite remember. In the dream, she had been smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face into something luminous. He had woken with the image still burned into his mind and a strange ache in his chest that he couldn't quite name. The morning routine unfolded with its usual rhythms: coffee, shower, the struggle to convince Lily that she needed to wear a jacket because autumn mornings were cold, regardless of how much she protested. She chattered about school and Maya and Professor Whiskers while Ethan half listened, his thoughts already drifting toward the day ahead. The restructuring announcement was scheduled for Thursday. 2 more days of preparation, of finalizing documents, and rehearsing talking points and bracing for the inevitable fallout when people learned their positions were being eliminated. It was the kind of work that demanded complete focus, the kind of professional obligation that should have consumed all his mental energy. Instead, he kept thinking about Claire's text, about the way her hand had felt in his, about the tears on her face when she talked about her father. Lily's school drop-off was quick and uneventful, punctuated by a hug that lasted slightly longer than usual and a promise to be on time for pickup. Ethan watched her disappear through the doors, backpack bouncing, then turned toward the office with a feeling of anticipation that had nothing to do with spreadsheets and org charts. The elevator delivered him to the 42nd floor at exactly 8:30. The office was already buzzing with activity, colleagues hurrying between cubicles, phones ringing, the low hum of professional purpose that defined every morning at Harrington Financial. Marcus caught his eye from across the room and made a gesture that clearly meant they needed to talk. Ethan made his way to his friend's desk, trying to look casual despite the nervous energy running through his veins. "What's up?" Marcus kept his voice low. Something's happening. Jennifer came down here about an hour ago asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Your schedule for the week, whether you had any conflicts Thursday afternoon. She was being cagey about it, but my guess is Claire wants you involved in the restructuring announcement. That makes sense. I helped with the presentation, so no, you don't understand. Marcus leaned closer. Jennifer specifically asked if you had personal obligations that couldn't be moved. She asked about Lily's schedule. Since when does the CEO's assistant care about an analyst's childcare arrangements? The question hung in the air, weighted with implication. Ethan felt his face grow warm. I don't know what to tell you, Marcus. You could tell me the truth. You could tell me what the hell is going on between you and Claire Harrington. There's nothing going on. Really? Because the woman who's famously never learned anyone's name below the VP level is suddenly asking about your daughter's after-school activities? That's nothing? Ethan struggled for an answer that wouldn't be a lie, but also wouldn't betray Claire's confidence. She's just being considerate. She knows I'm a single parent. She knows I missed the dinner for Lily's recital. She's making sure I don't have to choose between work and my family again. Marcus studied him with an expression that made clear he wasn't buying it. Be careful, Ethan. I mean it. Whatever this is, whatever you think is happening, you need to remember who she is. She's not your friend. She's not your... whatever you might be hoping she could be. She's the CEO of a company that will chew you up and spit you out if you're not useful anymore. I know who she is. Do you? Because right now, you look like a man who's forgotten that this is a job, not a romance novel. The words stung, but Ethan couldn't argue with them. Marcus was right about the risks, right about the professional suicide that emotional entanglement with Claire could represent. What he didn't understand, what Ethan couldn't explain, was that it was already too late for warnings. Something had shifted between them on that bathroom floor, something that couldn't be undone by caution or common sense. I appreciate the concern, Ethan said finally. I do, but I need you to trust me. Whatever is happening, I have it under control. Do you? Yes. Marcus didn't look convinced, but he let the subject drop. Fine. Just remember I warned you when this all goes sideways. The morning crawled by in a haze of meetings and documents. Ethan reviewed the final drafts of the restructuring materials, made suggestions that were accepted without discussion, and tried to concentrate on the work in front of him. But his eyes kept drifting toward the elevator, toward the doors that led to the stairwell, toward any movement that might signal Claire's presence on his floor. At 11:30, his phone buzzed with a message. Not from Claire's official line, but from the personal number she had used to text him last night. Can you come up? I need to discuss something. My office. Whenever you're free. His heart rate spiked. He typed back quickly, trying not to overthink his response. On my way. The walk to the 43rd floor felt different from all the other times he had made this journey. Before, it had been a summons, a professional obligation tinged with apprehension about what the CEO might want. Now it felt like something else entirely. An invitation, a continuation of the conversation they had been having in fragments and stolen moments since Friday night. Jennifer waved him through without comment, though her expression was carefully neutral in a way that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Ethan knocked on Claire's door and waited. Come in. She was standing by the window again, silhouetted against the gray autumn sky, but she turned when he entered. Today she was wearing a deep green blouse that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair slightly looser than usual, her posture less rigid. She looked beautiful in a way that caught him off guard, made him forget for a moment all the reasons this was complicated. Thank you for coming, she said. I know you're busy with the restructuring preparations. Nothing I can't step away from. He closed the door behind him. What did you want to discuss? Claire gestured to the sitting area in the corner of her office, 2 chairs arranged around a small table that he had never seen her use. Please, sit. They sat facing each other, close enough that he could see the faint circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal, close enough that the scent of her perfume reached him, something subtle and expensive that he would never be able to forget. I've been thinking about the SVP position, Claire began, about what it would mean for you, for your family, for your future here. I've been thinking about it too. And what have you concluded? Ethan hesitated. He had spent all weekend turning the question over in his mind, weighing the benefits against the costs, trying to imagine what his life would look like if he said yes versus if he said no. But every time he tried to focus on the practical considerations, his thoughts kept returning to Claire, to the way their relationship had changed, to the question of whether accepting the promotion would bring them closer together or create an impossible professional complication. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "There's a lot to consider." "There is." Claire leaned forward slightly, her eyes intent on his face. "But I want you to know something, Ethan. Whatever you decide, it won't affect what's happening between us. If you turn down the promotion, I won't be angry or disappointed. If you accept it, I won't expect anything in return beyond your professional dedication. What is happening between us?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, raw and honest in a way that surprised them both. Claire's expression flickered, uncertainty crossing her features before settling into something softer. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I've never been in this situation before. I've never let anyone get this close." "Neither have I. Not since Sarah." The mention of his wife's name seemed to shift something in the room, making the conversation feel more real, more significant. Claire reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, her fingers cool against his skin. "I'm not trying to replace her," she said. "I know I could never do that." "You're not replacing her. You're something else. Something I didn't expect. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "I don't know yet." He managed a small smile. "There's a lot to consider." Claire laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face in exactly the way it had in his dream. "Using my own words against me. That's bold for someone who works for me. I thought we established that I'm not very good at protecting myself around you." "No, neither am I." She grew serious again. "Ethan, I need to tell you something about Thursday, about the restructuring announcement." "What about it?" "The board has approved a new position, Chief Strategy Officer. It's a step above SVP, reporting directly to me with oversight of strategic planning, business development, and corporate communications." She paused. "I'm recommending you for it." Ethan stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. Chief Strategy Officer. That wasn't a promotion, that was a transformation. That was jumping 3 levels in the corporate hierarchy, leaping from senior analyst to the executive suite in a single bound. "Claire, I can't. That's not. Before you object, hear me out." She held up a hand. "You have the analytical skills, the strategic vision, the ability to communicate complex ideas in accessible terms. The board was impressed by your presentation. They've specifically asked about you, about your background, about your potential. But a position like that, people will talk. They'll assume I got it because of us." "There is no us, Ethan. Not officially, not in any way that anyone could point to." Her voice was careful, measured. "You would be getting this position because you earned it, because you're the best person for the job. Whatever is happening between us personally has nothing to do with my professional assessment of your capabilities." Can you really separate those things? I've spent 15 years separating my personal life from my professional decisions. Yes, I can separate them. She stood and walked to the window, her back to him. The question is whether you can. Whether you can accept this opportunity knowing that people might whisper, might assume, might wonder whether you deserve it. Ethan rose and followed her to the window. The city spread out below them, glass and steel and endless possibility, the kind of view that most people only saw in photographs. Standing here beside Claire, he felt like he was looking at 2 futures simultaneously. One where he stayed safe, kept his head down, maintained the careful boundaries that protected him from risk, and one where he stepped forward into something terrifying and exhilarating and completely unknown. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Claire turned to face him. They were standing close now, closer than they had ever been, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "I want you to make the choice that's right for you and for Lily. Not for me, not for the company, not for anyone else." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I want you to be happy, Ethan, whatever that means, whatever form it takes. And if being happy means walking away from all of this, from the promotion, from the career, from you, then I would understand. I would wish you well and watch you go and try not to let it destroy me." She smiled, but there was pain behind it. "I've survived worse losses than losing someone I barely know." "You know me." The words came out more forcefully than he intended. "You've seen things no one else has seen. You've heard things I've never told anyone. That's not barely knowing someone, Claire. That's something much more than that." "Is it enough?" "Enough for what?" "Enough to build something real. Enough to justify the risk, the gossip, the inevitable complications." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm not a safe choice, Ethan. I'm difficult and demanding, and I have more baggage than a commercial airline. I can't promise you anything except that I would try. That for the first time in 15 years, I would genuinely try to let someone in." His heart was pounding so hard he was certain she could hear it. Every rational thought in his head was screaming warnings, reminding him of all the reasons this was a mistake. But standing here, looking into her eyes, feeling the warmth of her hand on his skin, rationality seemed like a distant and irrelevant concept. "I need time," he heard himself say. "Not because I don't know what I want, but because I need to think about how this affects Lily. She's been through so much already. Losing her mother, adjusting to life with just me, building new routines and new expectations. I can't bring someone into her life unless I'm sure it's right, unless I'm sure it could last. I would never ask you to put me before your daughter. I know. That's one of the reasons I'm even considering this." Claire dropped her hand from his face, stepping back to create the professional distance that the moment required. "The restructuring announcement is Thursday at 3. I'd like you to be on the platform with me when I present the new organizational structure. Not because of anything personal, but because the board expects to see the people who will be leading the company into its next chapter. Even if I haven't decided about the CSO position? Even then, I'll introduce you as the person under consideration. It preserves the appearance of due process while signaling to the organization that change is coming." She moved behind her desk, putting the furniture between them like a barrier against temptation. "Is that acceptable?" "Yes." "Good." She sat down, and instantly she was Claire Harrington again, CEO, leader, the woman who ran empires. But when she looked at him, there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago, something vulnerable and hopeful and terrifyingly real. "That's all for now, Ethan. I'll see you Thursday." He nodded and turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Claire?" "Yes?" "Thank you for trusting me with all of this, for giving me the chance to make my own choice. Thank you for being worth trusting." He left her office with his mind spinning and his heart doing something he hadn't felt in years, something that felt like possibility, something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter in a story he had thought was already written. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan threw himself into the restructuring materials, refining documents and practicing presentations, keeping himself so busy that there was no time to dwell on the choice that hung over everything. But at night, after Lily was asleep, he lay awake thinking about Claire's words, about the CSO position waiting for him, about the risk of building something real with someone who had spent 15 years hiding behind walls. Wednesday evening, after dinner and bath time and the endless negotiations of bedtime, Lily surprised him with a question. "Daddy, are you going to get a girlfriend?" Ethan nearly dropped the book he was holding. "What makes you ask that?" "Maya said her daddy has a girlfriend now. She lives with them and makes pancakes on Saturdays." Lily pulled Mr. Whiskers closer. "I was just wondering if you were going to get one too." He sat down on the edge of her bed, struggling to find the right words. "Would that be okay with you? If I met someone?" Lily was quiet for a moment, her small face serious with the weight of consideration. "Would she be nice?" "I would never be with someone who wasn't nice, especially not to you." "Would she remember my birthday?" "She would definitely remember your birthday." "Would she know that I like chocolate chip pancakes better than regular?" "I would tell her." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Lily, if I ever do meet someone, I would make sure she understood how important you are. You would always come first. Always. Maya's daddy's girlfriend brings her presents sometimes. Not for any reason, just because. Is that something you would like?" Lily nodded slowly. "But mostly, I would like you to be happy, Daddy. You look sad a lot. Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever." The words hit him like a physical blow. He gathered Lily into his arms and held her close, feeling her small heart beating against his chest, amazed as always by the wisdom that children could possess without even knowing it. "When did you get so smart?" he whispered into her hair. "I've always been smart, Daddy. You just don't listen enough." He laughed despite the tears that threatened. "You're right. I should listen more." "So are you going to get a girlfriend?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I promise, if I ever do, you'll be the first person I tell." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She snuggled back under her covers, Mr. Whiskers tucked securely under her arm, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. Ethan sat watching her for a long time, thinking about what she had said. Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever. It was true, he knew. Sarah had loved him fiercely, completely, with everything she had, and she had made him promise, in those final weeks, that he would find happiness again, that he wouldn't close himself off from love because losing her had hurt too much. He had made that promise without believing he could keep it. The idea of opening his heart to anyone else had felt impossible, like asking a man with a broken leg to run a marathon. But now, 2 years later, here he was, standing at the edge of something he hadn't expected, with a woman who had shown him her own broken places and asked for nothing in return except honesty. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid. Thursday morning arrived with the sharp clarity of a day that would change everything. Ethan woke early, dressed carefully in his best suit, and spent an extra few minutes making sure Lily's hair was perfectly braided and her lunch contained all her favorites. He wanted everything to be right, wanted to start this day that would define his future with the foundation of his present firmly in place. The office was electric with tension when he arrived. Word had spread that a major announcement was coming, and speculation ran wild through the hallways and break rooms. Some predicted layoffs, others whispered about a merger. A few optimists suggested new expansion plans that might mean opportunities instead of casualties. At 2:45, Ethan made his way to the main conference room on the 44th floor, the largest space in the building, usually reserved for all-hands meetings and major corporate events. Chairs had been arranged in neat rows, and the platform at the front held a podium flanked by the Harrington Financial logo. Claire was already there, conferring with her executive team in low voices. She looked immaculate in a black suit that fit her like armor, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. But when she caught sight of Ethan across the room, something in her expression softened, just for a moment, before the professional mask slid back into place. She walked toward him, her heels clicking on the floor, and stopped close enough to speak without being overheard. "Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be." "The board approved everything this morning. The CSO position is yours if you want it." She held his gaze. "But you don't have to decide today. I've structured the announcement to give you time." "How much time?" "As much as you need." "I meant what I said, Ethan. This is your choice, your future." Before he could respond, the doors at the back of the room began opening, and employees started filing in. Within minutes, the chairs were full, and people were standing along the walls. The entire company gathered to hear whatever news had been generating so much speculation. Claire moved to the podium. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice carrying easily to every corner. "I know there's been a lot of uncertainty over the past few weeks, and I appreciate your patience while we worked through some significant decisions." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with the Harrington Financial logo. "Today, I'm announcing a restructuring of our organizational leadership. This is not about cutting costs or reducing our workforce. It's about positioning ourselves for the next phase of our growth, about making sure we have the right people in the right roles to lead us into the future." She outlined the changes with precision, naming each new position and the person who would fill it. Department heads were promoted or reassigned. New divisions were created. The corporate hierarchy shifted and reshaped itself on the screen behind her. Each change met with murmurs from the crowd. Then she reached the announcement Ethan had been waiting for. "Finally, I'm pleased to announce the creation of a new position, Chief Strategy Officer. This role will report directly to me and will have oversight of strategic planning, business development, and corporate communications." Claire paused, and Ethan felt every eye in the room shift toward him without knowing why. The board and I have identified an exceptional candidate for this position, someone whose work on our recent board presentation demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and transparent leadership that will define our future. She turned to look at him directly. Ethan Cole has been instrumental in shaping our direction over the past several months. His honesty, his analytical skills, and his commitment to doing what's right, even when it's difficult, make him the ideal choice for this role. She paused again. I've offered him the position. He's taking some time to consider it, as he should. A decision this significant deserves careful thought. The room erupted in whispers. Ethan felt faces turning toward him, expressions ranging from surprise to congratulation to, in a few cases, barely concealed jealousy. He stood very still, trying to process what had just happened, trying to reconcile the public nature of this announcement with the private conversations that had preceded it. Claire continued with the rest of the presentation, but Ethan barely heard her. His mind was racing through implications, consequences, possibilities. The CSO position was real. It was his if he wanted it, and Claire had just announced it to the entire company in a way that made clear she believed in him, that she was willing to stake her professional reputation on his abilities. Whatever else might be happening between them, that was a gift he hadn't expected. The meeting concluded with applause and a flood of questions that Claire handled with her usual grace. Ethan found himself surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations, shaking his hand, asking about his plans. He answered on autopilot, his attention focused on the woman at the front of the room who was fielding her own stream of inquiries. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse. People returned to their desks, their conversations, their speculation about what the changes would mean for their own careers. Ethan waited until the room had nearly emptied, then made his way to where Claire stood, still talking with a few board members who had attended the announcement. She noticed his approach and excused herself smoothly. Mr. Cole, I hope the announcement wasn't too much of a surprise. It was exactly the right amount of surprise. He kept his voice low, mindful of the people still milling nearby. Thank you for everything you said. I only said what was true. Still, it means a lot. She glanced at her watch. I have meetings for the rest of the afternoon, but I was wondering... She hesitated, and he saw something vulnerable flash across her face. Lily's recital. It was wonderful, you said. The autumn dance performance. Yes? I was wondering if there might be other opportunities, other events where parents are invited to attend. She met his eyes. I thought perhaps, if it wouldn't be too strange, I might like to see her perform someday. The request caught him off guard. Claire Harrington, CEO of a major corporation, asking to attend his daughter's school events. It was so unexpected, so intimate, that for a moment he couldn't speak. There's a winter concert, he said finally. December 15th. The first grade class is doing a holiday program. Would it be appropriate for me to attend? Parents can bring guests, family, friends. He paused, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. You would be welcome, Claire. Lily would be thrilled to know someone important was watching her sing. I'm not sure important is the right word. It's exactly the right word. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other, the professional setting receding into something more personal. Then Claire's assistant appeared at her elbow, reminding her of the meeting that was waiting, and the moment dissolved. December 15th, Claire said as she turned to go. I'll mark it on my calendar. Ethan watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the floor, her posture perfect, every inch the powerful executive the world expected her to be. But he knew what lay beneath that polished exterior now. He knew about the scars and the tears and the 15 years of loneliness. He knew about the father who never showed up and the mentor who betrayed her trust. And he knew, with sudden and complete certainty, that he was falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. It should have sent him running for the safety of his old life. The uncomplicated existence of a single father focused solely on his daughter and his career. But instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The drive to pick up Lily took exactly 23 minutes, giving him time to process everything that had happened. The announcement, the position, Claire's request to attend the winter concert. Each piece of the day settled into place like fragments of a puzzle he was only beginning to see. Lily was waiting at the front desk when he arrived, her face lighting up when she saw him. Daddy, you're early. I had a special day, so I wanted to get you early. He scooped her into his arms. How about ice cream on the way home? Really? It's not even Friday. Sometimes special days get special treats. They stopped at the shop 2 blocks from their apartment, the one with the rainbow sprinkles Lily loved. She ordered chocolate with extra sprinkles and chatted about her day while Ethan listened, his heart full in a way it hadn't been for a very long time. Daddy? Lily said as they walked home, her hand in his, ice cream dripping down her chin. Yes, sweetheart? You don't look sad anymore. He squeezed her hand. No, Lilybug, I don't think I am. The weeks that followed the restructuring announcement moved with the strange fluidity of time, when everything is changing but nothing has been decided. Ethan threw himself into his work with renewed purpose, taking on the responsibilities that would eventually belong to the Chief Strategy Officer while officially remaining in his current position. He told himself he was testing the role, seeing whether the demands would be compatible with his life as a single father. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was already committed. He just hadn't found the courage to say it out loud. Claire maintained professional distance during business hours, but their private conversations continued. Text messages late at night when Lily was asleep. Brief moments stolen in empty conference rooms. Looks exchanged across crowded meetings that said more than words ever could. They were building something, piece by careful piece, and neither of them wanted to rush the construction. November arrived with early frosts and the slow darkening of afternoons. Lily's excitement about the winter concert grew daily, her songs becoming a constant soundtrack to their evenings. She practiced in front of the mirror, in the bathtub, while eating breakfast. Every surface in the apartment had become a potential stage. Daddy, will Miss Claire really come to my concert? The question came on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks before the December 15th performance. Ethan looked up from the pancakes he was making to find Lily watching him with an intensity that belied her 6 years. She said she would try, sweetheart, but she's very busy, so we shouldn't count on it. But you like her, right? She's your friend? Ethan flipped a pancake, buying himself a moment to consider his answer. He and Claire had agreed to keep their developing relationship private until they were certain of its direction. Introducing someone to Lily was not something either of them took lightly. Yes, he said finally. She's my friend. Is she nice? Very nice. Once you get to know her. Lily nodded thoughtfully, apparently satisfied. I hope she comes. I want to show her the twirly part. The Monday before the concert, everything changed. Ethan was in his office, reviewing the quarterly projections that would form the backbone of the company's year-end report when his phone buzzed with a text from Claire. My office. Now. Something's happened. He found her standing at her window, her back to the door, her shoulders rigid with tension. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the room, and when she turned to face him, he saw something in her eyes that made his stomach drop. Claire? What is it? Close the door. He did, then crossed the room to stand beside her. Up close, he could see that her hands were trembling, that the careful composure she usually maintained had fractured around the edges. The man who hurt me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The one I told you about. He's dead. Ethan felt the words hit him like a physical blow. What happened? Heart attack, this morning. His assistant found him at his desk. Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. After everything he did, after all the lives he destroyed, he died peacefully in his corner office. No consequences, no justice, just nothing. Claire. I thought I would feel something, relief, maybe, satisfaction that he was finally gone. But I don't feel anything except angry. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. He got to die without ever facing what he did, without ever being held accountable. And now I'm the one left carrying the scars while he just disappeared. Ethan reached for her, pulling her into his arms without thinking about professional boundaries or office protocols. She collapsed against his chest, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and wounded. It's not fair, she whispered. None of it is fair. No, it's not. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be exposed, to be vulnerable, to have everything stripped away. Her hands gripped his jacket. Instead, he got to be a celebrated visionary until his last breath. He died a hero to people who never knew the monster he really was. Ethan held her tighter, feeling her pain as though it were his own. He thought about the scars on her back, about the 15 years she had spent hiding them, about the walls she had built to protect herself from a world that had failed her when she needed it most. "You survived," he said quietly. "That's the victory, Claire. Not his death, not his suffering. Your survival, your success. The fact that you're standing here, running a company, building something meaningful, despite everything he tried to take from you. It doesn't feel like a victory." "I know. Grief never feels like victory, even when it should." He pulled back to look at her, wiping the tears from her cheeks with gentle fingers. "But you're not alone anymore. You don't have to carry this by yourself." Claire looked at him with eyes that held 15 years of pain and the first fragile stirrings of hope. "I'm so tired of being alone, Ethan. So tired of pretending I don't need anyone." "Then stop pretending. Let me be here for you. Let me help you carry it." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached up and pulled his face down to hers. And for the first time since they had met, she kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or urgency. It was something softer, more profound. A surrender. A beginning. The moment when two people who had been circling each other finally stopped pretending they weren't falling in love. When they finally pulled apart, Claire's expression had changed. The tears were still there, but beneath them was something new. Resolution. "I've spent my whole life building walls," she said. "I don't know how to live without them." "Then we'll take them down together, one brick at a time." "What if I can't change? What if I'm too broken to be what you need?" "You're not broken, Claire. You're surviving. There's a difference." He took her hands in his. "And I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. The real you, scars and all. That's the only version I'm interested in." Fresh tears spilled down her face, but she was smiling now. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish." "Probably both." "Definitely both." They stood there in the fading light, hands clasped, hearts exposed, two people who had finally found the courage to stop hiding from each other. The city sprawled below them, indifferent to the transformation happening in the corner office, but neither of them cared. The world outside could wait. Right now, all that mattered was this moment. "The concert," Claire said finally. "Lily's concert. I want to come, officially. Not as your boss, not as someone testing the waters. I want to come as someone who matters to you." "Are you sure? People will talk." "People always talk. I'm tired of letting fear of gossip dictate my choices." She squeezed his hands. "I want to watch your daughter perform. I want to see the twirly part, and I want her to know that I'm someone who shows up." The words hit him with unexpected force. Someone who shows up. The thing Claire's father had never been. The thing she had spent her whole life trying to become, despite never having had a model for it. "She'll love that," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "She's been asking about you every day." "She has?" "She wants to know if you're nice. I told her you were, once she got to know you." Claire laughed, and the sound was like bells ringing. "No pressure, then." "No pressure at all." The days that followed moved with a different quality. Something had shifted in the air at Harrington Financial, though no one could quite identify what. Claire was still demanding, still brilliant, still the CEO who commanded respect and occasionally fear. But there was a softness around her edges now, a warmth that hadn't been there before. Employees noticed her smiling more often, staying late less frequently, taking time for conversations that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. Some of them guessed the reason. Marcus certainly did, though he had the wisdom to keep his observations to himself. The whispers that circulated through the office were mostly benign, tinged with curiosity rather than malice. The Ice Queen had thawed, and no one seemed to mind. Ethan officially accepted the Chief Strategy Officer position on the 1st of December. He stood in Claire's office with the contract in his hand, reading through the terms one final time while she watched from behind her desk. "You're sure?" she asked. "Once you sign, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He signed his name at the bottom of the last page and handed the document back to her. Their fingers touched as she took it, and the brief contact sent electricity through both of them. "Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Cole." "Thank you, Ms. Harrington." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, the formality of their words belied by the intimacy in their eyes. Then Claire's assistant knocked on the door, and the spell was broken. "Your 3 o'clock is here, Ms. Harrington. Send them in." Ethan nodded and turned to leave, but Claire's voice stopped him. "Ethan?" He turned back. "December 15th. I'll be there." He smiled. "I know you will." The night of the winter concert arrived with a dusting of snow that turned the city into something magical. Ethan picked Lily up from school early, her excitement barely containable as she bounced in the back seat of the car. "Is Miss Claire coming? Did she say she was coming? What if she forgets?" "She won't forget, sweetheart. She promised." "But what if something important happens at her work? You always say her work is very important." Ethan caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Lily, listen to me. Miss Claire is coming because you are important. More important than any meeting or phone call or email. She knows that, and she would never let you down." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "Is she going to be your girlfriend, Daddy?" The question was inevitable, but it still caught him off guard. He had been preparing for this conversation, rehearsing what he would say, but now that the moment was here, all his careful scripts dissolved. "Would that be okay with you?" he asked instead of answering. "I think so." Lily hugged Mr. Whiskers closer. "She makes you smile. Mommy would want you to smile." The words hit him like a wave, filling his chest with something vast and bittersweet. "You're right, Lilybug. Mommy would want me to smile." "So it's okay. Miss Claire can be your girlfriend." She paused thoughtfully. "But she has to learn to make chocolate chip pancakes. That's very important." "I'll make sure to tell her." The school gymnasium had been transformed for the concert. Rows of folding chairs filled the floor, each one claiming space for parents and grandparents and siblings eager to watch their children perform. A small stage had been erected at the far end, decorated with paper snowflakes and silver tinsel that caught the light and scattered it across the room like scattered stars. Ethan found seats in the third row, close enough to see Lily clearly, but not so close that she would be overwhelmed by his presence. He saved the chair beside him, checking his phone every few minutes for a message from Claire. At 6:45, 15 minutes before the concert was scheduled to begin, his phone buzzed. "Running late, traffic is terrible, save my seat. I'll be there." He typed back quickly. "It's saved. She's been asking about you all day." "Tell her I'm coming. Tell her I wouldn't miss it for anything." The minutes ticked by slowly. Parents filed in around him, filling the remaining seats, their conversations creating a low hum of anticipation that filled the gymnasium. Ethan kept glancing at the door, willing Claire to appear, hoping against hope that traffic would clear and she would make it in time. At 6:58, 2 minutes before the concert was supposed to start, the door at the back of the gymnasium opened. Claire walked in, slightly breathless, her coat dusted with snowflakes, her eyes scanning the crowd until she found him. She made her way down the aisle, excusing herself past knees and purses, until she reached the empty seat beside him. As she sat down, she reached for his hand and squeezed it tightly. "I made it." "You made it." "I told you I would." The lights dimmed. A teacher stepped to the microphone to welcome everyone and explain the program. But Ethan was barely listening. He was looking at Claire, at the snowflakes melting in her dark hair, at the flush in her cheeks from hurrying, at the way she kept glancing at the stage with genuine anticipation. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me be here." The first grade class took the stage in a wave of red and green, their holiday costumes slightly askew, their faces bright with excitement. Lily was in the front row, her dark hair braided with silver ribbons, her eyes searching the audience until she found Ethan. Her face lit up when she saw him, but then her gaze shifted to the woman sitting beside him, and her expression transformed into something that could only be described as wonder. She waved, a small flutter of fingers that was probably against the rules. Claire waved back, her smile wider than Ethan had ever seen it. The music began. Young voices rose in songs about snowflakes and holidays and winter wishes. They weren't perfectly in tune, and some of the children forgot the words, and one small boy in the back row was clearly more interested in picking his nose than singing. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the joy on their faces, the pure delight of performing for people who loved them. When Lily's solo came, The twirly part she had been practicing for weeks. She stepped forward from the group with confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She spun and moved her arms in the graceful arc she had been rehearsing, and her voice rose clear and sweet above the others. Ethan felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother to hide them. Beside him, Claire was crying too, her hand gripping his so tightly it almost hurt. "She's beautiful," Claire whispered. "She's absolutely beautiful. She looks like her mother. She looks like you, the way she smiles when she's happy, the way she gives everything to what she's doing." Claire turned to face him, her eyes shining. "You've raised an incredible child, Ethan." "I had help. Sarah was the one who taught her to dance. I just kept her practicing." "You did more than that. You showed up. Every recital, every concert, every moment that mattered. That's what children remember. Not the expensive gifts or the perfect birthday parties. They remember who was there." The song ended and the audience erupted in applause. Lily took her bow with the rest of the class, her face radiant with accomplishment. When she looked toward their row, Ethan gave her a thumbs up, and Claire blew her a kiss. The rest of the concert passed in a warm blur. More classes performed, more songs were sung, more proud parents documented every moment on their phones. But for Ethan, the evening had already peaked. Everything else was simply the pleasant aftermath of a perfect moment. When the concert finally ended, the gymnasium dissolved into chaos. Parents searched for their children, teachers tried to maintain order, and small bodies darted through the crowd with complete disregard for the adults trying to navigate around them. Lily found them before they could find her. She burst through the crowd and threw herself at Ethan's legs, nearly knocking him over. "Daddy, did you see? Did you see the twirly part?" "I saw everything, sweetheart. You were amazing. Miss Claire, you came!" Lily released her father's legs and turned her attention to the woman standing beside him. "You really came." Claire knelt down so she was at Lily's eye level. "I promised I would, didn't I? I never break my promises." "Did you like my twirly part? I practiced it 100 times, maybe 1,000. "I loved your twirly part. It was the best twirling I've ever seen." Lily beamed, then grew suddenly shy. "Daddy says you might be his girlfriend. Is that true?" Ethan felt his face flush. "Lily, we talked about this." But Claire just smiled. "Would it be okay if I was?" Lily considered the question with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. "Can you make chocolate chip pancakes?" "I've never tried, but I'm willing to learn." "Will you come to my other concerts too?" "Every single one, if your daddy says it's okay." Lily nodded slowly, apparently reaching a decision. "Okay. You can be his girlfriend." She leaned closer and whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "But you should know he snores sometimes. It's really loud." Claire laughed, the sound ringing through the gymnasium. "Thank you for the warning. I'll keep that in mind." The drive home was filled with Lily's chatter about the concert, the songs, the boy who picked his nose during the snowflake number, and her assessment of Miss Claire's suitability as a girlfriend. Ethan listened and nodded and felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the car's heating system. They dropped Claire at her building with promises to talk tomorrow and tentative plans for Saturday pancake lessons. As she stepped out of the car, she leaned through the window to kiss Ethan's cheek, then turned to wave at Lily in the back seat. "Good night, dancing queen." "Good night, Miss Claire." Ethan watched her walk into the building, her figure silhouetted against the golden light of the lobby, and felt something settle into place inside him. Something that had been broken for 2 years was finally starting to heal. The months that followed were not always easy. Building a relationship while navigating professional obligations and the needs of a 6-year-old required constant negotiation and compromise. Claire learned to be flexible in ways that didn't come naturally to her. Ethan learned to trust that vulnerability wasn't weakness. And Lily learned that families could be built in unexpected ways, from unexpected pieces, and still be whole. There were challenges. Office gossip intensified when people noticed the CSO and the CEO arriving at work together more mornings than not, and Claire had to address the board about their relationship, enduring uncomfortable questions about favoritism and conflicts of interest. Ethan faced skeptics who assumed he had slept his way to the top, their whispered assumptions cutting deeper than he ever admitted. But they faced it all together, every challenge, every doubt, every moment when the easier path would have been to retreat behind their separate walls. They chose each other instead, over and over, building something neither of them had believed possible. Spring arrived with crocuses pushing through the last of the snow and longer days that stretched toward summer. It was on one of those early spring evenings, with golden light flooding through the windows of Ethan's apartment, that Claire asked the question that would change everything again. Lily was in her room, working on a school project about butterflies, her voice occasionally floating down the hallway as she read facts aloud to Mr. Whiskers. Claire and Ethan were on the couch, her legs across his lap, a bottle of wine half empty on the coffee table. "I've been thinking," Claire said, her voice carefully casual in a way that signaled the thought was anything but. About? About walls? About taking them down. She shifted to face him more directly. About what it might mean to really let someone in, not just for dates and dinners and concerts, but for everything. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you, Ethan Cole. I love your daughter. I love the way you make me laugh, and the way you hold me when I cry, and the way you never tried to fix me because you understood I wasn't broken." She took a shaky breath. "I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I want something more than success. I want a family. I want to be part of yours." "Claire, I know it's complicated. I know we've only been together a few months. I know there are 100 reasons why this is too fast, too risky, too everything." She met his eyes, and he saw 15 years of loneliness giving way to hope. "But I also know that when something feels this right, you don't let fear make your decisions for you. You grab it with both hands and hold on for dear life." Ethan pulled her close, kissing her with all the tenderness and passion and gratitude that words couldn't express. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since you told me to go to Lily's recital. Maybe even before that. Maybe since the first time you looked at me like I was more than just another employee. So what do we do now?" "Now?" He smiled, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Now we go ask a 6-year-old for permission. Because if she says no, none of the rest of it matters." They found Lily on her bedroom floor, surrounded by construction paper butterflies and glue sticks, and the kind of creative chaos that only children can produce. She looked up when they entered, her face immediately going serious. "Why are you crying? Did something bad happen?" "Nothing bad, sweetheart." Ethan sat down on the floor beside her, pulling Claire down with him. "We want to ask you something important." Lily's eyes widened. "Are you going to ask Miss Claire to marry you?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "How did you know?" "Maya's daddy asked his girlfriend to marry him last month. Maya said it's what people do when they love each other very much." Lily looked between the two adults with shrewd assessment. "You love each other very much, right?" "Yes," Claire said softly. "We do." "Then you should get married." Lily returned to her butterflies as though the matter were settled. "Can I be a flower girl? Maya was a flower girl, and she got to wear a sparkly dress." Ethan looked at Claire, who was laughing and crying at the same time. "I think that's a yes." "I think you're right." He turned back to his daughter. "Lily, are you sure this is okay? Miss Claire would be living with us. Things would be different." Lily set down her glue stick and looked at him with an expression far too wise for her years. "Daddy, I want you to be happy. Mommy would want you to be happy too. And Miss Claire makes you happy." She smiled. "Plus, she's learning to make chocolate chip pancakes. That's very important." Claire reached out and pulled Lily into a hug. "Thank you, sweet girl, for giving us your blessing." "You're welcome." Lily hugged her back, then pulled away with sudden urgency. "But you have to promise you'll come to all my concerts, and my recitals, and my soccer games when I start soccer next year." "I promise." "And you have to learn to braid hair. Daddy is really bad at it. I'll practice. And you have to remember that Mr. Whiskers sleeps on my bed, and he doesn't like to be moved even if he looks like he's in the way." Claire laughed. "I will never move Mr. Whiskers." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Okay then, you can marry my daddy." The wedding was small, intimate, held in a garden in late June when the roses were in full bloom. Lily was indeed a flower girl, in a sparkly dress that she had chosen herself. Marcus served as best man, his earlier warnings forgotten in the face of undeniable happiness. And the board members who attended, skeptical at first about the union of their CEO and CSO, found themselves caught up in the genuine joy that radiated from the couple at the altar. Claire wore white, though she had laughed when Ethan suggested it. "It seems dishonest," she had said. "White is for innocence, and I am anything but innocent." "White is for new beginnings," he had replied, "and that's exactly what this is." When she walked down the aisle, her arm through the arm of an old colleague who had been like a father to her, Ethan felt his heart stop. Not because of how beautiful she looked, though she was stunning, but because of the expression on her face. For the first time since he had known her, Claire Harrington looked completely at peace. The ceremony was simple. They had written their own vows, and when Claire spoke hers, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. "I spent 15 years building walls," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I told myself they kept me safe, that needing no one was the same as being strong. Then you walked through a door you weren't supposed to open, and you saw me at my worst, and you stayed anyway." She reached for his hand. "You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that letting someone in doesn't mean losing yourself, that the scars we carry don't define us unless we let them." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I promise to love you, Ethan Cole, to be there for you and for Lily, to show up every concert, every recital, every ordinary Tuesday that turns out to be extraordinary because we're living it together. I promise to keep taking down the walls brick by brick until there's nothing between us but trust." When it was Ethan's turn, he found himself struggling for words. Everything he had prepared seemed inadequate in the face of what she had just said. "2 years ago, I lost the woman I thought I would spend my life with," he began slowly. "I didn't think I would ever love again. Didn't think I wanted to. The idea of opening my heart to that kind of vulnerability seemed impossible." He squeezed her hands. "Then I met you. The Ice Queen, everyone called you. The woman who never smiled, who demanded perfection, who kept the world at arm's length, and somehow, impossibly, you let me see behind the mask." He smiled. "I promise to love you, Claire. Not the CEO, not the image, not the armor. The real you. The woman who cries at concerts and laughs too loud and still can't make chocolate chip pancakes without burning them." "That was one time," Claire protested, and the guests laughed. "I promise to be the person who shows up," Ethan continued, "the way your father never did, the way you deserved all along. I promise to remind you every day that you are worthy of love, that the scars on your back are evidence of survival, not shame, that the walls you built were necessary once, but you don't need them anymore." He lifted her hands to his lips. "I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that the accident in your office wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything." The kiss that followed was captured in a dozen photos, from a dozen angles, by guests who couldn't help documenting the moment. But the image that would hang in their home for years to come was taken by Lily, who had grabbed someone's phone and snapped the picture from her spot at the front row. It was slightly blurry, off-center, and absolutely perfect. Two people who had found each other against all odds, choosing love over fear. That autumn, on the anniversary of the night Ethan had walked through Claire's bathroom door, they held a small celebration. Just the three of them, in the apartment that was now their shared home, with chocolate chip pancakes that Claire had finally mastered. "1 year," she said, watching Lily devour her stack with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. "1 year since you saw something you weren't supposed to see. 1 year since the best accident of my life. Do you ever regret it, walking through that door?" Ethan looked at his wife, at the woman who had transformed from the untouchable CEO into the person he loved most in the world. He looked at his daughter, happy and thriving, with a mother figure who attended every concert and learned to braid hair and never, ever moved Mr. Whiskers. "Not for a single second," he said. Claire smiled, the kind of smile that still took his breath away, and reached for his hand. "Neither do I." Outside the window, autumn leaves drifted past like golden confetti, marking the passage of another season, another chapter in a story that was still being written. There would be challenges ahead. There always were, but they would face them together, this unexpected family, bound by love, and healed by understanding. The accident that had once felt like an ending had become something else entirely. A beginning, a second chance, a reminder that the walls we build to protect ourselves can also be prisons, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone see our scars. Ethan Cole had learned that lesson. So had Claire. And together, with a 7-year-old girl and a worn, stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers, they were building a future that neither of them had dared to dream was possible. Some accidents destroy lives. Others create them. This one had done both. And from the wreckage, something beautiful had grown.